Thursday, the third day of February 2011 transmission is going to be particularly power-packed. George Noory joins us in the last 30 minutes. The second most listened to radio talk show host in the world, #1 overnight show. We're going to talk to him about a host of issues, may even go into overdrive a little bit with George. Nomi, who formerly worked high level as a managing director of Goldman Sachs and has been blowing the whistle on the corruption, is going to be joining us. And Brad Meltzer. We've now had a chance to see his Secret Society History Channel piece that I was in, and we're going to have an interesting discussion with him as well today. But all of the guests are in the last hour and a half of the broadcast. In the meantime, I absolutely must cover all of this news that's in front of us. It is all so incredibly, incredibly important. Now, in the interest of covering all the information I've got to get to, in the first, second, and third segments, up until 33 after, I'm going to get into world food prices hit record high, UN agency says. Big Sis cites staged Portland terror plot to expand domestic spy program. Airline employee plotted with al-Qaeda leader. Prosecution says it's Anwar al-Awlaki, who's just the CIA cutout. When you're contacted by Awlaki, that's the CIA or Mossad or MI6. That's been confirmed. We're going to get into the situation in Egypt, shippers concerned over possible Suez Canal disruptions. Muslim Brotherhood wants end to Egypt-Israeli peace deal. That's just some of the news in that vital stack that we're going to be breaking down. Also, some important news. Senate repeals part of health care law. They swore they never repeal a word of it, a dash of it. So definitely they know the momentum is against them, especially because now we're learning that Obama's issuing more and more waivers to select corporations who don't have to follow it. Hence, it's discriminatory, as the federal judge ruled a few days ago. But when I come back at 33 after I cover this other important news, I am fit to be tied over this. And we're seeing the deindustrialization of the United States through NAFTA and GATT, through globalism by design, via the World Trade Organization and its unfair playing field for free nations against totalitarian systems like China. But in the last 2 years since Obama got into office, one of the things that he was really different than Bush on is that he swore to bankrupt coal companies, and we have the video clips, those are coming up. 51% of U.S. power conservatively, electrical power, comes from coal-fired plants. And the biggest supplier in the country is the state of Texas. That is, the plants in Texas supply the surrounding 5 states. And in the past, part of northern Mexico. Now Texas is having to get its power from Mexico. That is in the news today. And we're going to be breaking all of that down. But the big issue here is this is globalization. China can build 3 new coal-powered plants a week. The U.S. doesn't get 3 a year. And I have the stacks of news where the EPA has been shutting down new plants, shutting down old plants, not letting new plants be built, but then giving waivers to select globalists like General Electric to be the only ones allowed to keep the old plants open or expand existing plants or build new ones. So it's not just about shutting down our industry. It's about selectively deciding who can operate. And we've seen major Dallas and North Texas hospitals without power yesterday and today. We've seen one of the tents at the new sports stadium for the Super Bowl collapse. We've seen police stations without power. But don't worry, the Super Bowl has power. You got to keep the distraction going. And this illustrates everything we're talking about in this post-industrial world if they're able to get this situation rammed through. So we're going to be breaking that down and really illustrating what globalism means to this once free republic and other Western nations as our power is literally cut off. The globalists are seizing every facet of infrastructure. We are live. It is Thursday, the third day of February 2011. Nomi, former insider managing director at Goldman Sachs, will be joining us with vital inside info on how the globalists are destroying our society by design. Brad Meltzer will be popping back in about a show, Decoded, and we'll discuss what he did with his television program that I was in last week dealing with Bohemian Grove. And, of course, the one, the only George Noory will be joining us as well today. I want to just play this clip, this little 13-second clip, and if you just type into a search engine, Obama pledges to bankrupt coal, you'll get Biden saying it, Obama saying it repeatedly, the big environmental groups saying it repeatedly. This is their policy, and I'm going to be discussing this coming up at the bottom of the hour in detail, a special report. This is the deindustrialization and the shutdown of our country. China builds 3 to 5, different statistics are out there, coal-powered plants a week. We get about 2 to 3 a year permitted. The federal government is shutting down existing plants, not permitting new plants, and trying to restrict the output of the plants. And that's why Texas is now having rolling blackouts, and hospitals are losing their power. But that's coming up at the bottom of the hour after I get into the other news. But here is Obama during the campaign pledging to bankrupt the power plants in this country. This is an act of siege, an act of economic warfare by the globalists who have their investments in China and India and Mexico and other third world countries. And if the slave wages aren't enough to destroy our industry, shutting down our power supply certainly is. And then, of course, the investments of the globalists only go up, and Obama has given waivers to General Electric on power plants, but nobody else. That's why the globalists want control of everything, because then they can set up unfair trade advantages for themselves, just like giving 500-plus waivers to major Fortune 500 companies like McDonald's on the healthcare law. This is mafia government, where you got to go to the government for the favors to be able to operate, and it's big corporations lobbying for this to shut down their competition. Here is the trader-in-chief, Barry Soetoro.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
Well, I think that said it pretty clearly, but let's play it for folks that may have missed it, the 13-second clip, one more time.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
But China is exempt and has completely dirty plants with no type of scrubbers. Here in the United States, many years ago, I bought into the propaganda that coal-powered plants were dangerous and put out lead and mercury and other things. And then I did research. Turns out that under the systems the United States uses, nothing comes out of the chimney. Nothing comes out but water vapor and carbon dioxide. Because they have water through dozens and dozens of levels, depending on what system they have, where the smoke goes through it, and the smoke runs through the water, and all that toxic waste then condenses out. Now, there is a problem. They take that waste and put it in your water, because that's one of the main derivatives is from the scrubbers is sodium fluoride, lead, mercury, arsenic, and a cocktail of other things. So the government, the federal government's lobbying to put the waste from the coal plants in our water supply, but then telling us we got to shut them down because of the carbon dioxide. You've really got to love that. And they tried to build a power plant out near our family farm in East Texas for many years. The environmentalists and the EPA shut that down a few years ago. And there are a few plants in the area supplying Dallas and Fort Worth that are 100 miles north of our family land. And every day, I mean, I can see the power plant from our farm. It's about 2-3 miles away, maybe 4. I don't know. You can see the stacks off in the distance. You'll see Cessnas flying past it and back over it. And I did some research, and sure enough, those are federal Cessnas that fly repeatedly over them with sensors looking for any toxic off-gassing. All right, I'm already getting into this, and I've got some notes here. I want to really decode the whole thing, break it down, put it in very clear English for everybody to understand coming up at the bottom of the hour. All right, let me just blitz through news now. On the situation in Egypt, obviously you saw the horses, the camels riding in, supposedly backers of the Egyptian dictator Hosni Mubarak, running over people with horses and camels, beating people's heads in with clubs, beating up reporters. Some reporters really have been hurt. I watched the video of Anderson Cooper. It's a complete stump. a complete stunt. Looks like they might have slapped him on the head a few times, but it certainly is wrong. And they are rolling up the different opposition leaders and the media, showing you what martial law looks like. Continuing, shippers concerned over possible Suez Canal disruptions. They've got the military guarding the Suez Canal, but there are riots now going into their second week in the area of Suez, and it's starting to cause some disruptions of personnel and people going in and out of the dock facilities where the oil and natural gas is loaded on to the super tankers. So very serious situation there, and obviously you've seen oil prices the last 2 weeks steadily going up. Here is a report. This is in the Jerusalem Post. It's in the RIA Novostat out of Russia. Muslim Brotherhood wants end to Egypt-Israel peace deal. And who did the Associated Press report last week that our government has been meeting with in the CIA? The Muslim Brotherhood. And who are they trying to overthrow now? The Saudis, the Yemens, the Jordanians. And Israel is freaking out about this, at least on the surface. Though the war hawks over there, I'm sure, will like conflict. That will increase their power. But on the surface, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli leader, is saying this is terrible. But here are the globalists, and here is the Davos crew, the George Soros crew, on record with El Baradi and the Muslim Brotherhood, trying to put them in all over the Middle East to destabilize the region. So I guess Tarpley, now a week and a half ago, has been proven completely right yet again. Egypt's Band of Muslim Brotherhood movement has unveiled its plans to scrap a peace treaty with Israel if it comes to power, which the globalists will love. Major destabilization. A deputy leader said in an interview with NHK-TV. And if Israel claims that they're upset about this, well, why did Israel in 1973, admittedly, this is Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, you can just, UPI's reported on over the years, just type in Israel founded Hamas. 1973 as a, quote, counterbalance against Hezbollah. So there it is again. Why do they want that? And why has Israel been caught? Israel caught staging fake bombings. Israel caught creating fake al-Qaeda. To bomb them, their own people. I'm not saying every attack is staged, because some are real, but the point is, Israel's been caught doing this because they don't want a peace deal. So Israel's all claiming they're upset about what the West is doing, but the Israel, the U.S., England, they're all merged at the hip. Continuing, U.S. response to Egypt draws criticism in Israel. Associated Press, Netanyahu and other cabinet officials have been critical of it, saying it's destabilizing the whole region. Well, why'd you create Hamas, then, as a counterbalance against Hezbollah? I mean, why are you staging bombings against yourself? And by the way, if you're a new listener and are going, whoa, I never heard that, just search it. I mean, I just told you. UPI, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz. Those are just off the top of my head. You can pull those up right now. Continuing, pro-Mubarak riders chase reporters into Cairo hotels, arresting members of the press. Over 20,000 take to streets in Yemen for a day of rage. Again, the Muslim Brotherhood rebellion spreading. Journalists get attacked, arrested in Egypt. That's a story out of Yahoo News. Again, another telltale sign of martial law. It all just continues from there. Raw Story reports protesters run Mubarak thugs out of Main Square. So it looks like the government-backed thugs, if you can believe that that's who they work for. I can't believe really anything we were saying that they're supposedly being defeated. U.S. Angered over Egypt, hopeful over Yemen and Jordan. So there's also some crosstalk where the government's openly saying that Mubarak should step down, but at the same time saying they're angered by what's happening over there when they admittedly triggered it 2 weeks ago. Oil prices shoot above $103 on Egypt crisis. This out of the AFP. Brent crude rallied to a 28-month high above $103. Remember what you were told 4 months ago by Lindsey Williams. The deathbed intel we got from Ken Fromm, the former head of operations for Atlantic Richfield. He has another source, even more high level, who's still alive, former CEO of a major oil company, telling him the same thing 4 months ago and saying, watch the Middle East blow up with destabilization as the trigger for that. And here it is, $103 today for crude oil. So that is just some of the news that we have on that front. We'll continue to cover new developments as they unfold today. Continuing with what's happening worldwide with dollar devaluation, the world uses the dollar as the world reserve currency. That is, they may still have their own domestic currencies, but they trade internationally for finished goods, raw goods, commodities, oil, silver, gold, in the dollar. The dollar is being devalued worldwide, and that is the main reason that food prices are exploding worldwide. The globalists put that policy in place, then order Egypt and others to not give people as many food stamp allotments, food allotments. Now 43+ million Americans are on food stamps as well, digital food stamps for their little government ID cards. And so they order these countries to impose things that they know will cause a rebellion, and then the globalists come in and trigger the rebellion with their operatives to take those countries over. But here is, again, AFP. World food prices hit record high. UN agency says world food prices reached their highest level ever recorded in January and are set to keep rising for months, the UN Food Agency said on Thursday. That's global inflation, warning that the hardest hit countries could face turmoil. But then the IMF and World Bank run the UN, and they have triggered the policies that have caused this. Unbelievable. Wall Street Journal, some 43 million Americans now use food stamps. Even Donald Trump is warning that an economic collapse is coming, is imminent. It's all coming up. Well, look at the health care legislation repealed in part in the Senate. I'm going to continue in this segment with other important news, and in the next segment I'm going to break down the globalist seizure of our power infrastructure, our entire economy, our banking system that is coming up, and how Obama's pledge to shut down and bankrupt the coal industry in this country, the power plant industry, is now bearing fruit by rolling blackouts nationwide. Especially here in Texas. Hospitals don't have power. You name it, but don't worry, the Super Bowl does. Hospitals right next door don't. So that is all coming up. And it ties into Enron and how they would do rolling blackouts on purpose, training people to accept higher prices. Very important information. George Noory joining us coming up later. Nomi Prinz, Goldman Sachs insider. Brad Meltzer, of course, of the show Decoded. Jam-packed transmission for you today. Continuing here, some good news, and this shows the pressure that's being mounted. Politico reports Senate repeals part of health care law. The Senate voted last night for the first time to repeal a piece of President Obama's health care overhaul, President Soturo, rolling back a new tax reporting requirement that's been universally panned by business owners. And the one provision that they've now repealed is the 1099 tax documents on all cumulative purchases from a single vendor. So that means a mom and pop, let's say you sell 4 or 5 quilts a year to customers. Well, now you've got to file a 1099 on those specific things you're doing, and even more paperwork. They estimate close to $50 billion a year is spent in the U.S. just complying with the income tax law alone. I know we do here. I mean, we have accountants, the whole 9 yards, very expensive, and the laws are constantly changing, and it's all baloney paid to the private Federal Reserve. But we choose our battles here because they would definitely clap me in irons in a minute about it and pay this money to the Federal Reserve. But we continue to expose them via the First Amendment to remove these criminals. It was included in the health care law because they thought it would raise $17 billion in previously uncollected taxes. But a bipartisan coalition of business groups have opposed the provision, arguing that it would bury them in paperwork. And so now the House concurs with the Senate move. Because a spending bill has to originate in the House, they'll be able to get rid of it. So that's certainly some good news. We need to repeal the entire unconstitutional monstrosity. I'm going to get more into this later. But we've talked a lot about this yesterday. Anwar al-Awlaki, Fox News, Associated Press reported 5 months ago, the Pentagon confirmed, was in secret meetings 2 months after 9/11. This was the number 3 guy in al-Qaeda at the time. Number 3. They're now saying he's the top al-Qaeda guy under bin Laden, so I guess number 2. The number 2 guy under the imaginary Easter Bunny, or the Lucky Charms elf. But they're now saying that Anwar al-Awlaki, who was most wanted at the time for 9/11, but then he's secretly hanging out at the Pentagon with the Secretary of the Army and the top brass. This is the guy who they form connections with. He's the guy that reportedly, boy, he's busy, talks to the underwear bomber and runs that. He runs the Times Square bombing. He runs the shoe bomber. He runs the Fort Hood shooter. And he's in emails with all of them, commanding them, in some cases, in hundreds of communiques on what to attack and what to do, in some cases for years. And then magically the State Department's ordered to help the underwear bomber get on the plane with the fake bomb. That's all confirmed. So here is a direct connection to the government staging these events through a mentally ill or mentally retarded in some cases, or low-grade moron type individuals that they go out and find and recruit. Now, really, who these people are talking to is the FBI and the CIA. And then they just say Anwar al-Awlaki, and then he's a known globalist operative who will take the blame later and who is left alone. But here's ABC News. Airline employee plotted with al-Qaeda leader, prosecutors say. Anwar al-Awlaki communicated with encrypted messages with British Airways employee. Man, he's everywhere. Why, he's involved in the 7/7 bombing 6 years ago in London. He's involved in everything. I mean, how much more of this garbage are we going to take? How much more of this are we going to buy into? We know the globalists, through Anwar al-Awlaki, are finding patsies to go basically promote an attack. Separately, you've got the Portland situation a few months ago, all these other events where the FBI admits, even mainstream news says they're staging it. They go find normally some person out of prison who isn't even originally a Muslim, like this Martinez character, and they go to them and they say, cook the bomb, here's where you bomb, and then they try to let them carry the bombing out with fake bombs. And it's just the same thing. And then they use this as a way to take our liberties and take our freedoms. So there is that report. Also, another report I'm going to get to later. WikiLeaks, U.S. and China in military standoff over space missiles. The U.S. government supposedly threatened to militarily attack China over this. Stay with us. It's all coming up. We're going to get into the carbon taxes straight ahead. Siege is the most ancient form of total war. If you look at the ancient city-states, when enemies would invade their regions, their favorite tactic would be to have overwhelming force and drive the inhabitants, the agrarian farming inhabitants, into the fortress citadel and then cut off the stream or river, divert the river going into the city-state, the walled city, and wait sometimes months or even years while they starve to death inside and become so weak that they give up and open their gates and are then conquered. And that's what globalism is. That's what the New World Order is. If you go back 360 years ago, roughly, the French developed something called mercantilism. The French were building an empire at that time in the Americas, as the French, the British, the Dutch, and others were. And they found that if they allowed their provinces, if they allowed their colonial holdings to develop any finished good industries, if they allowed them to weave the cotton into clothing, if they allowed them to produce their own firearms, if they allowed them to produce their own pickaxes and shovels or their own primitive factories, that they would routinely then rebel and try to set up their own sovereign nations. But if they could be kept completely dependent on the British, on the French, on the Dutch, on the Spanish ships coming into their different provinces that they controlled, their different colonial holdings, then they could keep the price very low, keep them very poor, keep prices down, and then ship the finished goods back to France, back to England, back to Spain, back to other European imperial nations, and then sell those finished goods back to the colonial slave holdings. This was just a modern, more modern version of feudalism, where on average in feudal England, feudal France, feudal Spain, Portugal, if you go study the history, and I'm going to get to the power plants being shut down, that's what's happening in modern time. It's a form of siege, artificial scarcity. But if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it, as Lord Acton said. He also said, power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so through that mercantile system, they were able to keep their competition out in the different nations that they controlled or colonies that they had created. Also, they would have imperial licensure. It would be illegal to sail a ship or carry goods or brew beer or make clothing or smelt silver or have a blacksmith shop unless you paid a license. But that wasn't enough. You had to get approval for the license, and that was the attempt to block the Renaissance that was starting at the time. And everything we've seen in the last 360 years, this is all mainline history, just not taught in schools, has been an attempt by the robber baron class, the ruling royal class, the insider class, to shut down their competition. And we see modern examples of this. The healthcare law, written by the insurance lobby on record, forces 30+ million Americans to buy their insurance. Then it allows the insurance companies to set what type of medical care can be given. So you pay more money but get less care, takes doctors out of the equations. And now they hand out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of waivers to massive companies and to Obama contributors and unions to where they do not have to get the health insurance, but you and your company that's not part of the insider group and can't give millions of dollars in campaign contributions, you have to get the insurance, and now you can't compete with the McDonald's across the street with your restaurant. You go out of business. Now, that's modern mercantilism. But if you go back to feudalism, that began to fall in the last 500 years, and then mercantilism 140 years later or so was the response to that. And mercantilism was just the French term for what the British and others were already deploying. But it was codified in economic theorem and taught in the universities as a way to control. It was taught as a way for the empire to control. This is not debated. This is in the text issued to the imperial legates, the imperial governors of the time. This is a system. That's what globalism is the modern version of that. But if you go back to the previous feudal system, on average, the populations, and it's still like this in Japan, who was feudal, and still is to a certain extent in England and France, and every system creates the same system because it makes sense for ruling classes. They want to control you by making you poor, by making you dependent. But in the old feudal system, roughly 80 to 90% of the land was off limits. You had to get a license for what type of crop you could grow. You had to give roughly, on average, 20% to the local lord. You weren't allowed to have hunting dogs. You weren't allowed to take rabbits. You weren't allowed to take deer. And it was a system, and that's what modern environmentalism is, to shut down and to have everybody completely on the edge of survival, on the edge of starvation, malnourished and weak. That's why many elites wrote and bragged about how they'd be 6'4", and the little people, whether it was France, Japan, or England, they would be 5'2". I mean, if a man was 5'5", he was seen as a giant if you go back 500 years ago. Because for generations, they were kept on the edge of starvation, in rags, sick, debilitated, not getting enough minerals, snot running out of their noses. That's how it was described, just dirty hovels. And if they caught you in the winter as your wife and children were starving, if they caught you with a rabbit trap, and they did almost daily inspections, the local thugs that worked for the sheriff or the constable, and if they caught a stew pot with a rabbit, that was one of the most common, they would take you out in the public square and the next day tie you up, the most favorite way to do it, and walk up with a knife and slit your throat in front of everyone. Or they would hang you high because your children had their ribs sticking out, our ancestors, their ribs sticking out of them, starving to death. And if you dare kill a rabbit, you are dead, 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 dead. And that's what controlling how big our toilets are and our light bulbs and our houses and our cars. They build this infrastructure dependent on fossil fuels. Now they start shutting it off. Now they start controlling it. And they state they want a post-industrial neo-feudal state. That's in the United Nations Biological Diversity Assessment 1996 document. It's at the end of my film, screenshots of the text as I read it aloud in 9/11, The Road to Tyranny, 2002 release, 9 years ago. It is a complete plan. And to understand what's happening with the power plants, you've got to understand this. And when you understand what's happening in history, you understand what's happening currently. And they would keep people on 10 to 20% of the land. They had to give roughly 20% of what they produced to the establishment, and any of the finished goods or silversmithing or blacksmithing or goldsmithing or any of the supposed higher-level small middle-class jobs, those were tightly controlled, and huge taxes and bribes had to be paid the local lords, who in turn hired thugs to control you, and then the lords would pay it on to the king or to the barony, who would then pay it on to the king. This is history. This is what the globalists are setting up today, but a high-tech version. Now, I'm going to get into what's happening with the power plants now and the rolling blackouts all over the country, and how this is part of a design right now, and how this is neo-feudalism and serfdom and a modern mercantile model. But first, I want to play one of many clips of Barack Obama during the campaign speaking to a newspaper in an interview, saying we are going to bankrupt the coal companies, the coal plants. Sure, you can build a coal plant, but the EPA is going to put taxes on you so high you will go bankrupt. Now remember, 51% of our power is supplied by coal. Here's that clip.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
There you have it. We're going to bankrupt you because the tax is going to be so high. Now, enter into this that China builds, and I see different numbers in the press, 3 to 4 to 5 power plants per week. Huge coal power plants. They're building fast rail. They're building railways, roads, everywhere. But the United States, Canada, Western Europe, with our criminal governments, controlled by the Club of Rome and the Bilderberg Group, who openly write policy papers out of Club of Rome calling for a post-industrial world. We have the head of the Goddard Space Center saying, I want a post-industrial America. We've got to shut off the infrastructure. Then they lie and say that the coal is dirty. Well, if you go back to 1996, Bill Clinton took several million acres of land off use for mining for the only clean coal deposit. It's completely clean, doesn't have any lead, mercury, arsenic in it, in this hemisphere. The second biggest deposit in the world, the only deposit of any worth in this hemisphere. China has the only other one, and it's the biggest. Instantly, and it was in the press at the time, when he federally did an executive order and blocked any companies mining that clean-burning coal, after he put rules in that you have to use clean-burning coal, which the companies want to use. It's much less expensive to use that coal because you don't have to spend all the money, with the scrubbers and the filters. That company's stock within 1 week in China doubled. And guess who was invested in it? Henry Kissinger, George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, Al Gore. Same system again. Mercantilism. By controlling the regulations, they shut down coal American companies could get in and get and supply. They've got to get the coal under rules, so now they've got to buy it from China, who has sweetheart deals. China's run by the internal Communist Party. It's really just modern feudalism called communism. They know how to work with the feudal lords here. So it's another deal. But it gets worse. It gets much, much, much worse. Here's an article out of February 2nd, out of the Examiner, the Washington Examiner, illustrating what I've been saying. Obama issues global warming rules in January that is saying they're going to massively decrease the output of every power plant in the country not owned by GE. So we'll have power shortages. But don't worry, we can buy from all the huge power plants built right across our border, anticipating this inside baseball move from Mexico. And now that's where Texas is getting its power during this cold spell, is out of Mexico, the Associated Press is reporting. Again, sweetheart deals right on the border. What did I report in 2008 when Rick Perry went, 2007 when Rick Perry went to the Bilderberg Group meeting in Istanbul, Turkey? What was in the released minutes of speeches when Bilderberg released some of them? They were talking about shutting down power plants in Texas that supply 5 surrounding states. #1 power producer in the world geographically. Texas, #1. Meanwhile, China has no controls on their dirty coal and the clean coal they're burning. It goes up into the atmosphere, comes right around through the jet stream, and guess where it dumps? between New Mexico and Louisiana, with Texas being the center point of that key jet stream that goes over the industrialized areas of China and dumps right in over Texas. So we're getting the lead, the mercury, the arsenic, no controls. But then, going back decades ago, they put scrubbers in all of our plants. It's a good idea, where they go through many, many layers of water spraying over the smoke to where nothing comes out but water vapor and carbon dioxide. But they know the public is ignorant. So they'll point news cameras at a generator, at a large factory heating or cooling system when it's cold weather. Right outside my office, there's a factory 200 yards from here, and it looks like smoke's pouring all over the street. I heard other people, from another company going, my gosh, look at all that smoke. Is it safe? They actually were doing that last year when it was smoking. It's freezing cold. There's high humidity, and they've got a giant heating and cooling system across the street at the factory, and it's water vapor in the cold air, just like when you breathe in cold weather, and it looks like smoke. It's water vapor and carbon dioxide. I know you know that, but school kids and Americans that watch TV, they point cameras at smokestacks. Those aren't smokestacks. Those are the scrubber towers with layer after layer after layer. Sometimes it's in the dozens, depending on what type of coal they're burning. It's going up through water, spraying on it, and all of that is purified out and then stored and then put into our water supply. It's called sodium fluoride. Look it up for yourself. So Obama's so worried about carbon dioxide and water vapor, but then he wants you, and the government wants you, to drink the toxic waste from it. Oh, there is toxic waste from it that could just be stored. But no. It's put in our water supply, and we drink it. But I digress from the heart of the matter. Obama issues global warming rules in January, gives General Electric an exemption in February. General Electric, the largest coal-powered builders in the world, they're also the biggest builders of dams, hydroelectric, they have been given a waiver, and they have a link to the Obama-issued waiver. Because remember, Obama now, Congress didn't pass these new carbon taxes. They didn't sign on to Kyoto. And so Texas is the only state to say, well, we're not going to follow the EPA just because you say so. You don't have a law. Congress said no. And Obama says a month and a half ago, well, I'm seizing Texas power plants, seizing the regulations of them, putting federal inspectors in, and saying you will comply with non-existing laws. But then it's all selective. Right over the border, the dirty Mexican power plants that run just like China, they're now going to supply Texas, but they're insiders. They knew about this change coming. They get the waivers here in the U.S. and in Mexico, like General Electric is. So that's what's happening here. And as a response to all of this, here are the headlines. Mammoth storms leaves bitter cold destruction. Blackouts anger Dallas hospitals, CBS News. And they're asking, why does the giant new Texas stadium get a waiver? Why are they getting power? Well, you got to keep everybody distracted with that football game while the hospitals don't have power. I mean, it usually takes me 20 minutes to get to work. It took me like 45 yesterday. There was no ice on the roads in Austin to speak of. A few bridges, I guess I saw some on the edges. But there were no street lights on major roads like 360. No street lights and no police directing traffic. They just turned the street lights off. But, oh, there was a waiver for government buildings in the downtown. And there's a waiver for the new mega Cowboy Stadium that they've built. Just like there's a waiver for everything else. Oh, you're an insider? You don't have to get health care for your employees. Oh, you're an insider? You can have your plant. Oh, you're China, where the globalists have built their sweetheart deal factories? You don't have to have any cuts, but America does. What's going to happen to our economy with this? What's going to happen in California that went ahead and agreed to the 20% carbon tax on basically all activity in California? What's that going to do to the already 30% unemployment that even 60 Minutes reports they've got there? Over 30%. 22 nationwide. This is globalism. And Obama is making good on his pledge to shut down industry and to shut down, and it's an act of treason, it's an act of war. He's a globalist stooge. It's all insider deals. It's discriminatory against other companies. They're lying about what's going on. And I got the reports here. In Kansas, in South Dakota, in Texas where they're not letting them build new plants that have even been permitted. I'm going to cover that when we come back. China can have 3 to 5 a week. We can't get 2 or 3 new plants a year. Can you put that together?
Everybody knows the war is over. Everybody knows the good guys lost.
Nomi Prinz is going to be joining us, former Goldman Sachs insider. George Noory needs no introduction. Brad Meltzer today, jam-packed. This report just went up at prisonplanet.com, and it's going up at Infowars.com. And, of course, the headline is, Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. This story is so important. Please get it out to everyone you know. Call Rick Perry. Call the Attorney General Abbott, who is trying to countersue, and tell him it's time to point out that this is treason. This is economic warfare against our country. This is discrimination. This is waivers given to General Electric, who Obama has now brought in as the head, the former head of GE, as the head of his economic board that decides all these inside sweetheart deals. This is so off-the-chart corrupt. Again, Obama issues global warming rules in January, gives GE an exemption in February. Texas in showdown over U.S. carbon regulations. Regulations, not law. Here is the Houston Chronicle dealing with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality being pressured by the EPA to not allow the activation of a $3.2 billion coal-powered plant that's been built in Corpus Christi, and they're trying to keep it from being turned on. I've got another big stack of reports here where all over the United States, they are shutting down existing plants or not allowing new plants that were built to be turned on. And what's the response? Blackouts anger Dallas hospitals. They don't have power, but the stupid Super Bowl stadium does. Again, why was Cowboy Stadium exempt from blackouts? CBS News. Here's AFP. Mexico supplies electricity to Winnery, Texas, because they don't have the rules to follow. They're allowed to have power plants. So now they supply us, where the globalists have sweetheart deals, where only select companies are allowed to go down and set up plants in Mexico. Because when you have a tyranny in place, it knows how to work with the insiders. Here's another one. Obama, EPA blocks South Dakota coal power plant. Here's another one. Governor Sebelius banned new coal plants in Kansas. Goes on and on. Georgia judge blocks coal plant on global warming grounds. And they're having power outages and blackouts all over the country. Texas agency grants power plant permit over EPA objections. So the feds come in and just shut it down. They are shutting off our power. The TSA is now seizing infrastructure, travel, the roads. The federal government's setting up threat fusion centers, federalizing local police, seizing local governments. The feds are coming into the state of Texas and saying, we don't care if you follow the original federal law. We got a new regulation for you. Cutting how much power the plants can produce, not letting new plants open. This is an act of war against the United States. And it's outrageous. And it dovetails with something very, very important. Back in 2005, we wrote the article, Paul Watson and Alex Jones, The Myth of Peak Oil. The Myth of Peak Oil. The Myth of Peak Oil. And it gives, you can click through and read articles and documents that the Associated Press got in lawsuits on 2005, 2006 meetings with the big 5 oil companies meeting now 15, 16 years ago, to quietly buy up oil refineries owned by smaller companies and shut them down so there'd be an artificial bottleneck. We're awash in oil, natural gas, and coal. They have to artificially lobby for regulations that shut down their competition. And then they claim that a bunch of ragtag hippies did this. They had nothing to do with it. That's coming up because this takeover, this planned economy is for the insiders, and it's going to destroy our middle class and our free market civilization and our standard of living. Thank you for joining us. We have Nomi Prinz, former managing director at Goldman Sachs, inside whistleblower, joining us in T-minus 30 minutes. Brad Meltzer, who joined us last week ahead of the premiere of the History Channel show that I appeared in, Secret Societies, will be joining us again, and I'll give you my view of what I really think of the episode he put out when he joins us. coming up in the next hour. We also have George Noory of Coast to Coast AM joining us. Really looking forward to that. Website, of course, is coasttocoastam.com. I spent the last 30 minutes of the last hour getting into this new report that just went up on Infowars.com. Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. And that's exactly what has happened, and that's exactly what Obama says he wants to do. So I'm going to basically go over the other areas of this I haven't gotten to yet, recap the facts, and call on you, the listeners, to give me ideas, or I've got ideas. What do we do politically? What do we do when we're under siege, when our power's being cut off and everything's being moved to Mexico and China? They've built in the last decade a string of power plants along the U.S.-Mexico border, predominantly in Texas. They know Texas supplies 5 other states who are now buried in snow. That's why Texas is running out of power, because we're supplying the other states, which is fine. It creates jobs here, gives people power elsewhere. The lignite coal they mine is right here in Texas, one reason they have so many plants here. And this is all a program to deindustrialize the country. And Obama has said this. That's what's so incredible about how they admit they want a post-industrial world. Now, Paul Watson and I did the research and put this article together today. And he's going to be even adding more information, because we're moving quick on this story as the broadcast unfolds. But hospitals, police stations all over the state and other states, but predominantly in Texas, didn't have power yesterday and part of today. And now another giant wave of this blizzard that's covered more than 40% of the country is pushing down across the Midwest into the east as we speak. Hitting much of the northern part of the country now, coming south, hitting where I live in central Texas about 5 p.m. tonight. And I've got to worry about even getting to work tomorrow. And when we talk about just the corruption of government, a decade ago, they had a snowstorm and the power went off and the traffic lights went out. They'd have cops at key intersections coming to work on major roads that happen to have red lights on them, like 360 yesterday. It took me 45 minutes instead of 20. And there were no police to be seen. They're normally there writing tickets. I normally see about 9 to 10 police cars or motorcycles writing tickets on my drive to work. Saw nothing. And the lights were almost completely out. And there were huge traffic jams backed up on them. And I was talking to one of my IT guys. He said yesterday, driving in, he saw on William Cannon, no lights on, cars backed up for miles, and no police directing traffic because the traffic lights were out. But then he saw cops writing tickets with radar guns up William Cannon towards the middle school that's there. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. This is globalism. They cut the power off because they haven't built enough power plants, or they've restricted what they can put out. They won't have cops out directing traffic as they're supposed to. They got them revenue generating. And what have they announced all over the country with 60% layoffs, 35%, 40%? You saw the police chief last year in Oakland say, we're not going to respond to all these dozens of crimes. I think it was 40-something crimes, including armed robbery, you name it. We're going to do revenue generating. And what do these other sheriffs people I see announce? They go, yeah, we're laying off 60% of our sheriff's deputies. We'll no longer respond to crime. We're just going to revenue generate. So this is a completely predatory, out-of-control government, and we're turning into a third-world nation. That's why third-world nations can't run or operate, because their governments steal everything as a tool to make society break down, so you're so poor you don't have 2 pennies to rub together to ever become independent and resist them. We'll be right back with key intel on this. Straight ahead. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us. We are now 8 minutes into the second hour. It is Thursday, the 3rd day of February, 2011. The #1 overnight talk show host in the country, the second biggest talk show host in the world, biggest audience, George Noory, is joining us in the last 30 minutes of the broadcast today. Coming up in about 25 minutes, Nomi, former managing director, Goldman Sachs, big whistleblower, will be joining us, and we have the host of the hit TV show on History Channel, Brad Meltzer joining us, because now I've seen the TV program he produced dealing with secret societies, and I can give you and Mr. Meltzer my view on the Bohemian Grove piece that I appeared in last week and my take on that. I covered that some yesterday, but I'll be getting back into it with Mr. Meltzer coming up for about 15 minutes in the next hour today, ahead of George Noory joining us. Coming up, more on the situation in the Middle East and North Africa. Incredible developments now with the Muslim Brotherhood saying they're going to break the peace treaty when they take over Egypt with Israel and basically move towards war with them. The Israeli and Russian news and Egyptian news is all reporting that, and our own government admits they triggered the riots. The people have real reasons to be angry. Their food prices have gone up because of globalist IMF, World Bank policies and dollar devaluation driving up commodities. But this is just amazing as the New World Order tries to trigger global unrest as a pretext to bring in more tyranny. So that is coming up as well. But I have spent much of the last 30 minutes, the last hour, getting into rolling blackouts all over the country. Hospitals, police stations without power in Dallas-Fort Worth area yesterday and today. They're complaining, saying, why has our power been turned off to conserve energy and supply it to 5 other surrounding states? We're the biggest energy producer in the country here in Texas, per capita for land space in the world. Why is this happening? Why is Obama blocking new power plants, at least 3 of them in Texas, including one they've almost completed in Corpus Christi at over $3 billion facility? Why have they allowed Mexico to build all these power plants with U.S. and globalist companies, and then now they're supplying Texas? It's all part of a plan to shut down our industries. And it's a stated plan by the globalists for a post-industrial world. That's what China is all about. That's what the tariffs against our goods are about. That's what their low currency is about, is making it where we can't compete. And then globalist insiders who have sweetheart deals with the communist Chinese, the Mexicans, and others, they get to set up power plants and things and factories that no one can compete with. And then the very same corporate interests lobby our government and other Western governments to put in laws shutting down their competition. And again, it's just like Obama giving out hundreds and hundreds, I know it's over 500 waivers and counting, to McDonald's and others to not make them buy health insurance for their employees, but everybody else has to. And don't forget, Obama put out an order, not a law. He doesn't have a law to be doing all this, to be shutting down Texas power plants and not letting them build new ones and restricting the output of other power plants or putting federal taxes on them. That's what the Kyoto Protocol does. He's just doing it. But here's the headline. Obama issues global warming rules in January, gives General Electric, who the head of his economic councils, the former head of GE, an exemption. They get an exemption from the new regulations, not laws, because they are, of course, the biggest builder and operator of these power plants. It's about shutting down their competition. And I will bring you back to 2005. We saw all this coming and wrote about it. Their complete plan. The myth of peak oil, Paul Joseph Watson's, Alex Jones, October 12, 2005, prisonplanet.com, Infowars.com. And we talked about how carbon taxes are meant to selectively shut down power plant companies, coal companies that aren't insiders, how China is building multiple power plants a week at the time. Now it's upwards of 5 a week, but we're not allowed to have even 3 new ones a year. How then they have cheaper powers. They can produce cheaper goods on top of their slave wages. More regulations get piled on here. Then they lie and say our power plants are dirty when they're amongst the cleanest in the world. They put them through these, quote, scrubbers that take everything out but carbon dioxide and water. That's why Obama is saying carbon dioxide is poisonous and wants to tax it. This is huge. This is siege. This is deindustrialization. This is the post-industrial world. But in this report we wrote, we linked through to the Associated Press and Raw Story, who got the documents, and they're up on our website. Group, internal memos show oil companies limited refineries to drive up prices. Donald Trump was right earlier this week on Newsmax saying we're awash in oil. There's tankers lined up worldwide wanting to offload it. There's not enough refineries. There's not enough infrastructure. This has been done by design. We know in 1995, 16 years ago, and in 1996, 15 years ago, and it was all covered by the AP, and then we pointed it out in 2005. They sued and got the documents. They said we got too much oil. We got to lobby the environmentalists to shut down smaller companies. We've got to go buy up other refineries and shut them off to create a bottleneck. And the same mega big oil, mega big energy is going after all the smaller oil and coal companies and smaller power plants. The feds came into Austin with money a decade ago or 9 years ago and bought up the city-owned power plant that could supply most of the city by itself and just shut it off. They're shutting them down, the old plants. They're blocking new plants that have been built, bankrupting companies. Then later GE comes in and buys them for pennies on the dollar, and then they get the waiver to turn them on. And so, there you have it. It's the same thing. What do you think's happening with Mexico right now? They're the only ones on the Texas region to be able to build all these new plants that don't have the regulations on them, and then now they are supplying Texas. That's in the AFP and Associated Press today. Let me run through some of these headlines. Mammoth storms leave bitter cold destruction. Blackouts anger Dallas hospitals. Why aren't they getting power? Why aren't police stations getting power? But the big Superdome they've built for the Dallas Cowboys, where they're going to have the Super Bowl with the Steelers up there. Why was Cowboy Stadium exempt from blackouts? CBS News. EPA to take over Texas air permitting for major refineries and power plants. Obama EPA blocks South Dakota coal power plant. Governor Sebelius banned new coal power plants in Kansas. Georgia judge blocks coal plant on global warming grounds. They're shutting down existing ones, buying up existing ones, and shutting them off to create artificial scarcity to drive up the price of per kilowatt hour power that can then only be owned by selective insider globalist companies. This is mafia government. This is so criminal, it makes my head spin to have this type of garbage going. And then I have the headline that Mexico is now supplying the energy to much of Texas because we're supplying it to other states. They're shutting down our industry. They're shutting down everything. Mexico supplies electricity to Winnery, Texas. Mexico State Electricity Company on Wednesday started supplying electricity to the United States and to Texas, where demand shot up amid unusually cold temperatures and caused power outages. Mexico's Federal Electricity Commission was determined to support Texas with electrical energy faced with problems that the state is suffering due to climatological conditions, a statement said. Okay, now, there's the real scoop. There's what's going on. What do we do about this? Guys, I meant to tell you earlier, will you pull me up the Congress switchboard number and also Rick Perry's number? We also need to pressure the Attorney General of Texas, who has been countersuing the feds, I got to say valiantly, and say it's time for injunctions. It's time to put the state guard in front of these power plants and not let the feds cut down output as they've been doing. It's time to say no, 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 and call them and put pressure on them. We got forced inoculation suspended in Texas, and they admitted it was the 5,000 phone calls this show generated. We got the funding for the race war film Machete pulled, so they didn't get state incentives. Our listeners did. We can get things moving on this, and you can get things moving, but I want a key search term today. I want to do it, and I want it to be the #1 search term on Google today. This is so absolutely important. And I printed the article, and I had it right here in front of me. But I've been so busy ranting that I can't find it. Here it is. Here it is. This is the PrisonPlanet.com headline version. Because Google tries to block us a lot, we'll give key articles, one headline on InfoWars, another on PrisonPlanet.com. Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. And we have the video of him saying it. We have it all on record, their whole plan, the insider deals to shut down their competition. This is such an important, condensed piece of information. Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. Let's go with the search term, Obama triggers blackouts. Obama triggers blackouts. Obama triggers blackouts, and that will lead people, even though they block us out, you can post it on your website or blog and get all the traffic. I don't care. Take our articles. Take them, take them, take them. I just want to defeat these tyrants. Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. Key article, put it into Google search engine over and over again, the 3 words, Obama triggers blackouts. That's the Infowars.com headline on that. The PrisonPlanet.com headline on this key article that Paul Watson and I put together, Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. Okay? And that's the second search term. Obama triggers blackouts. Obama triggers blackouts is the number one search term. And then we need to do a secondary search term. And let's do the search term Obama's nationwide blackouts. So the first search term is Obama triggers blackouts. The second search term is Obama's nationwide blackouts. Obama's nationwide blackouts. Put that in Google over and over again. Hit enter, 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 enter. Let's just send it to number one. Obama triggers blackouts, the first search term, and Obama triggers blackouts is the second term. And we come back, I'm going to read part of this article by Paul Joseph Watson. But yes, I'm upset. Yes, I'm angry. I mean, my country that I love is being shut down, and they admit they're doing it by design. And we come back, we'll play that 13-second clip again of Obama saying, hey, you can build a power plant, but we're going to put taxes on it so high that you're going to go bankrupt. And he's saying you're going to go bankrupt. Your factory, your school, your business, your house, you're going to pay more for power. They put in carbon taxes last year in Austin. They say $3.4 billion over the next 3 years. They just said Austin's putting added taxes on your power and gas as part of carbon taxes. Where I live, they're doing this. They're raping us. They're engaging in... What if I say I will never surrender? Look, they just repealed one of the more draconian provisions in the health care bill that in the aggregate, if you sell $600 worth of products, be it Beanie Babies or knives, it doesn't matter, on your website or in your business, you got to file a tax form on it. That has now been voted down in the Senate. We're going to repeal the whole thing. And they don't even have a law. They got one court saying Obama can run around outside of law and shut down power plants and put taxes on everybody. The power to tax, the power to destroy. We're going to repeal that. But folks, you need to call Congress and say, we know that the shutting down of power plants from Georgia to South Dakota to Texas to Florida, California, you name it, not letting them build existing plants. The feds coming in and buying up city-owned plants and shutting them down like in Austin, the Holly Street power plant. We know what you're doing. And that GE's being given waivers, just like Obama insiders are being given waivers from the health care bill. It's pure discrimination. It's mafia government where only the insiders can operate. Now we got to get our power from Mexico. They built a $3+ billion power plant in Corpus Christi, and I got the Houston Chronicle calling for it to never be allowed to be opened. And they're lying and saying these things are toxic. When all that comes out of them is carbon dioxide, and that's why they're trying to say that's toxic so they can shut them down, while China has no restrictions on them. That's why we can't compete. And their currency's been devalued against ours. Governor Rick Perry and his staff welcome your comments and concerns. Call him and tell him we know he went to Bilderberg to discuss Texas energy shutdown in 2007 in Istanbul, Turkey. I reported it on at the time. It's in my film Endgame. We confront Perry about it. And it's time to call the governor's office, 800-843-5789, 800-843-5789, 800-843-5789. The globalists admit Texas is the battle line on the NAFTA superhighways, on the power grab of the energy systems, of our infrastructure, the mafia grabbing it and saying they control it. That's what this is. You go back 100 years ago to New York in the Italian section or other areas where they had mafia. They come in and say, you're not allowed to have a grocery store here because my cousin owns the one down the street. And they just burn you down. Or they'd say, let us take it over and we'll let you still operate. Or give us a tax. That's all this is. You're not an insider, got to buy health care for your employees. You're not an insider, can't have a power plant. I mean, this is so criminal. You are a criminal, Obama. The globalists supporting this are criminals. Anyone involved in this in Congress are traitors to this republic. This is such a big issue. You call Rick Perry. I want a press conference now. I want Rick Perry to get out there, and he's done this before when you call, and he's told insiders at Fox News, I'll just leave it at that he is upset about this show and knows the power of it. He's worried about Alex Jones and Ron Paul. We wrote about that last year. He's worried about you. You call Rick Perry, you call the Attorney General, and you tell him, get out there and talk about how they're cutting our power off and making us get it from Mexico and pay more. 800-843-5789, 800-843-5789, Rick Perry. You can also fax the governor, 512-463-1849. Citizens Assistance Telecommunications. You can call 512-463-2000, 512-463-1782. That's the main switchboard, 512-463-1782. And here is the number to Congress. Here's the number to Congress. You can call Congress and call your congressperson up and tell them you know what's going on. This is a mafia operation. If we point out what this is, that word will get out and we can stop them. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. And will this save the world making these calls? No. But resistance is victory. 202-224-3121 to call the Congress of the United States. And if you miss those numbers, just search the number for Congress, search the number for Perry, call them. Go down there to the governor's office. Go to the Capitol right now. You know, you're mad about this? Go talk to your Congress. They're about to go into session. Go shake their hand. Tell them, I want you to do something. You got this tyrant, this globalist insider, this mafia operator with a gaggle of crooks that control him, Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Barack Obama. I just read you the headlines where he's giving waivers to insiders on their power plants and shutting everybody else down. I mean, is there nothing that these mafia people won't get away with? Is there nothing that we won't put up with? And look, get the word out about this. The hospitals don't have power in many areas of North Texas. But the stupid sports stadium does, because you got to have that distraction continue. There it is. Obama issues global warming rules, gives GE an exemption. Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. That's the PrisonPlanet.com headline. The Infowars.com headline. Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. Key search term, Obama triggers blackouts. And I didn't get to that audio clip. We'll play it as we go to our guest coming back, where he says, yeah, we're going to bankrupt you. That's financial terrorism. Nomi is a journalist and senior fellow at Demos, and we're going to be talking to the best-selling author here in just a moment. She's an insider, Goldman Sachs whistleblower, and we're honored to have her. But I said I'd play this clip. This is Barack Obama during the campaign. He said it many times, so did the Vice President Biden, that they wanted to bankrupt power plants in America. Meanwhile, they're not pressuring China, who builds a whole bunch of them, every month, to have any controls on theirs. And now we're having rolling blackouts because of this, and we have the article, Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. And the big issue here is insiders at GE, now heading up as economic counsel, the former head of GE, they get waivers from all this. So it's another unfair trade advantage, just like insiders getting waivers from having to buy health insurance for their employees like McDonald's. I mean, this is mafia government, where you get the favors from the mafia government. That's why they want to have authoritarian control, nothing to do with environmentalism. So here is that clip of Obama saying he wants to bankrupt power plants. That is an act of war, of economic sabotage. But that's what Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and GE, these guys are all about, using government to shut down their competition so they can vertically integrate markets. Here's the clip.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
Now, Obama was not drunk there. Our computer played it in slow time for some reason, but it's only a 13-second clip. We're gonna try to play that clip for folks one more time, but you can just search Obama says he'll bankrupt plants. You'll see many other clips of him online in different speeches. Here it is.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
Okay, there you go. They're going to bankrupt them. Now, this dovetails with what Nomi has been talking about. And, of course, her latest book is It Takes a Pillage, Behind the Bonus, Bailouts, and Backroom Deals from Washington to Wall Street. And, of course, she's also the author of Other People's Money, The Corporate Mugging of America. She wrote that 6.5 years ago in October of 2004, a devastating expose into corporate corruption, political collusion, and Wall Street deception. That's why the big mega banks and the insiders want big government, because they can shut down their competition. Before becoming a journalist, Nomi worked in Wall Street as a managing director at Goldman Sachs and running the international analytics group at Bear Stearns in London. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Fortune, Newsday, Mother Jones, The Daily Beast, Newsweek, Slate.com, The Guardian UK, The Nation, American Prospect, Alternet. The list goes on. And NomiPrinz.com is her website. Links to that up on Infowars.com. It is great to have you here with us, Nomi.
Well, it's great to be on the show, Alex. I've been listening to you for a long time, and it's really great to be on. Thank you. Well,
we're honored to have you. You heard me just getting into the power plants being shut down that aren't insiders with the government. That pretty much integrates with what you've been talking about this rigged, planned, insider, crony capitalist system. What's your take before we get into the larger issues on these power plants being shut down from Georgia to Texas and now blackouts everywhere?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, that what you're talking about, what he was talking about, is that if you don't have the money to effectively create your own loophole and work it out with the government, is as one of the larger power companies like a GE, then you're going to not be able to operate. And as a result, it consolidates the power, no pun, actually pun intended, into a handful of a few companies, which is pretty much how corporate America works. We are a nation in which the corporations have continued to merge, have continued to consolidate power and therefore control and access to government and collusion with the government in order to, yes, get rid of competition and also control markets. And whether those markets are with power or those markets are with finances or those markets are with loans to homeowners, it's all really part of a system where companies really not just control, but are gaining every day more control over all the things that touch our lives.
Absolutely. And this is a rigged system, and that's what the globalists admit at Davos they want, is a global system they control, where they control the rules for their advantage. And from my perspective, it's purely a mafia tactic. What would you call this system?
Well, it is, you talk about the mafia as, say, extracting money from various small businesses in order to have garbage pickup, in front of their businesses, and then the list, of course, goes on and on. But you're effectively they're extracting income in order to basically control a certain set of practices. And the United States government does really the same thing, except it goes through the form of lobbyists and campaign contributors. So basically, the bigger a company is, the more they can pay for lobbyists, the more they can pay for lawyers, for accountants, for everyone else to not just create laws, but get around laws and find their own loopholes and basically suggest laws that have loopholes in them for them to use, and they have the funds to do that. And, we still have a system where the Supreme Court is fine with that. Recently confirmed the fact that they're fine with campaign contributions coming through corporations. Obviously, lobbyists are going in and out of Washington, and in many instances, like with the head of GE now, they don't even have to, it's not even really an issue. They're just on the advisory board of the Obama administration, and it's not just the Obama administration, of course, it's any administration, it's just the one that's currently operating. And that's really how the money not just gets consolidated on the profit of these companies, but gets used to infiltrate our laws, create their own loopholes, and facilitate their own future profits because of that.
Nomi, I could talk to you as a former Goldman Sachs managing director for 10 hours. There's so many things to discuss, but on your radar screen right now, I saw you on Max Kaiser a few days ago. It's actually going to air tomorrow, but he played an exclusive clip here of you basically saying, yeah, this is insider trading just with or borders on it with the Facebook Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan deal. There's a lot of different deals that are going on right now. But what is most important on your radar screen that you want to warn people about, being somebody who's been an insider and really knows how things work?
Well, I think, you mentioned the Facebook deal, and that's only important because it just demonstrates how Goldman Sachs, after having created itself into a bank holding company, basically the type of a bank that is supposed to administer deposits for its customers, to provide loans for its customers, those customers not being millionaires, of course, but being regular individuals, which aren't the customers of Goldman Sachs. However, the name of it as a bank holding company, which it became in the fall of 2008, enabled it to have federal support from the Fed, from the Treasury Department, from the FDIC, and enabled it to carry on its trading with our support, with our federal support, which it should not be doing. And that's just an example of how a company uses the government when it needs the government in terms of funding it at the brink of a bankruptcy, which it stood at in the fall of 2008, and then says, you know, the heck with you guys, we're just going to go offshore, do what we want, raise money for our private deals, and if the SEC is going to ask us questions, we're just going to take them offshore and go somewhere where we don't have any questions, because those questions are annoying. They get in the way of us, you know, raising fees and gaining our profits, and we're just going to go around. And so you have this global system which enables companies like Goldman, like Morgan Stanley, like JP Morgan, like any international conglomerate, to find the place where the regulations are going to be weakest for that particular deal, that particular day, that particular practice in which they are going to be involved. And that's really a big problem with the system. Right now, for example, in Egypt, one of the things that I was looking at, and I'm by no means a Middle Eastern scholar, so I preface this with that, but a lot of the more recent economic problems that Egypt and other countries in the Middle East have been due to the fact that they have pursued opening their borders to international speculators and international capital and international banks buying up portions of their land and portions of their financial system. And of course, when international capital comes into a country, it's there for a bet. It's there for a short time. It's there to find the best hot deal, and it leaves as soon as it's not making a good return on it staying there. And that's what's happened to a large extent in Egypt in particular. Egypt was one of, according to the World Bank and the International Financial Corporation, which operates with the World Bank, one of the top 10 what they call reformers. Reformers to them are not reforming their country's economics for their citizens. They mean reforming their borders to allow speculative capital to come in and go out as freely as possible. And it was in their top 10 list for 4 out of the last 5 years. And the results, of course, when the worldwide depression started, is that the money that came in equally left as quickly, if not more so, leaving a lot of further economic devastation to the citizens of that country in its wake. And then that's besides the corrupt dictatorship and the regime that has been there for 29 years. But this is really the more recent effect of this global domination of international capital to just find itself wherever the borders are most amenable to that.
Nomi, you talk about the worldwide depression. I've had countless other prestigious economists on, and they've agreed that even Stiglitz 2-3 years ago, Nobel Prize winner, admitted we were going into a depression. By every yardstick, unemployment's 20+% here, 30% in California. The government lies and says it's 9.6, 9.7. You know, as somebody who's been inside of the heart of Goldman Sachs, who's since then written and researched this, from your research, what's the real state of the world economy, and where are we headed?
The real state of the world economy is that individuals are finding themselves less able to make a living if they had a living, and falling into the poverty levels of their respective countries more and more quickly. And that's a direct result of trading and of bank capital and hedge funds and private equity funds finding spots and sort of pillaging them, to use the term of my book, but really pillaging whole economies for whether it's commodities, whether it's to churn a population into shady loans and to package those loans up into toxic assets and leave the waste to the Federal Reserve and the rest of the country. Those are things that the financial industry in particular, and the financial industry is part of every other industry. I mean, I focus on banks having been inside of banks, but there's no company, there's no large conglomerate that doesn't work with the large financial institutions to find ways around paying taxes, creating long-sustaining jobs in the areas into which they infiltrate, because there's no need for them to do so. And so the state of the world is really captive to that type of international financial strategies that continue to get worse.
And there's
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
No, and that's why, you see in the Middle East, all of those countries have on record somewhere between 10 and 16% unemployment. But just like the United States, where we have on record, as you said, 9.4% right now unemployment, that does not in any way capture the underemployment, the jobs that are not sufficient to even cover health care or rent or rising costs of food and other types of commodities because they just don't stretch as far even when people have them. And so, you know, if you look at the underemployment statistics, they're in double digits and rising. And that, coupled with the squeezing of prices and any type of commodity and any type of financial service or any type of service throughout the world, has the effect of squeezing people financially even further. And there's no barriers to that. The depression, the worldwide depression that started with, you know, what we call the crisis of 2008 was something that was really building up for many years for individuals not seeing jobs, seeing prices get too high.
Well, that's right. You predicted it in your 2004 book, and there's a method to this madness. These big central banks, who, of course, the shareholders are private central banks and families and shareholders, they are openly dollar devaluing worldwide, knowing that that would cause record food prices that then puts pressure on countries like Egypt. And then they offer the solution, now admitting that they sent in El Baradi to start the revolt 2 weeks ago. So back when Stiglitz quit in 2002, we got those thousands of pages of IMF and World Bank documents that BBC reported on. And right there they said, once we get a country under our control, then we further bankrupt them, then there's riots, then that destroys confidence, then we can come in and buy up things even cheaper. Right. And so they have a real stake in the pillaging, putting the populations under their control into a servile position so they can come back and pillage them and basically, in a mercantile neo-colonial way, conquer them. What's the mindset of a Goldman Sachs? What's the mindset of these pillagers? What's their end-game strategy? Because now they're saying they openly want world government, a new global cashless currency, that all of their currencies are denominated in, run by private central bankers.
Well, that's the private central banks are the friends of the international private banks because they allow for easy funding to trade, and the motive for everything Goldman Sachs does is purely profit. It's not obviously doing God's work. It's not trying to create jobs. It's not trying to stick around in regions and actually have a fair economic system, meaning fair for the population of those particular regions. It's in to get a good deal, and it's in to get out, really, as soon as it can possibly do so, as soon as it's churned whatever that good deal is. I mentioned in a recent piece, actually I think on my blog, about, for example, in early 2008, when things were really getting obviously bad with the subprime lending and toxic asset creation on the back of that here in the United States, that there were UK arms, for example, of Goldman Sachs, buying up pieces of luxury real estate developers in Egypt, sort of trying to squeeze at that particular moment the last drops of what was the end of a real estate speculation boom, which will reboom again, but which now is in its lower stages. And so that's the mentality. Mentality is, where can I go? Where can I trade? Where can I get investors and fee them to trade with me in order to make as much as I can, as fast as I can?
And they're doing this.
A thought to what happens in the wake of that.
Where do you see the derivatives bubble going? Because there's no way to get rid of that black hole, but they've sold us on this too big to fail, so now they've tied the treasure, the pensions of the entire world to their Ponzi scheme.
Well, and not only that, the financial reform bill, and I loosely use the term reform, it's not a reform bill, but the thing that passed in Congress and was signed by President Obama last summer to supposedly reform the banking system and does absolutely nothing remotely of the sort. It's just very, very many pages of a lot of legal banter back and forth, all of which can have holes poked in it really, really quickly. I mean, I can poke a hole in almost any line in that reform bill without even having a staff of lawyers. But one of the things that it was supposed to do, for example, is create a clearinghouse or a place where derivatives would trade out in the open, would be transparent. But all the loopholes related to that said, well, yeah, we want them to be transparent and trade on clearinghouses, but we forgot to mention that 96% of the clearing activity of the place where these transactions are pen and inked or basically transferred are owned by the top 5 banks in the United States. They're owned by J.P. Morgan. They're owned by Goldman Sachs.
Nomi?
Goldman Sachs owns one of the largest clearinghouses are a portion of that in the world.
Nomi, stay there. We're going to come back and continue along that line and ask you the question, where's it all going? Don't forget, right now we're fighting the complete takeover of our energy infrastructure by the insider globalist. The article at Infowars.com, Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. Get it out to everybody. Google search term, Obama triggers blackouts. We got to fight back against this. We're talking to Nomi Prinz of NomiPrinz.com, best-selling author. Latest book, It Takes a Pillage, Behind the Bonuses, Bailouts, and Backroom Deals from Washington to Wall Street. Wall Street has been lobbying for domestic police states. They lobby to put dictators in worldwide. They basically, want to secure their ill-gotten gains. They want to make us pay off their derivatives. I was talking to during the break. I mean, you agree that we're basically, by every measurement, really are in a depression?
Yeah, I think we are. And by the measurements that matter to individuals, by the measurements that entail getting jobs or keeping jobs that enable one to afford life, by being able to afford whether it's health care or food or oil or whatever it might be, there's such a chasm between the haves and the have-nots, and that's not been something that hasn't existed in our world before. It's just that more recently, and particularly since the economic crisis spouted in 2008, in the fall of 2008, it's gotten worse. And the reason it's gotten worse is because there's this external veneer of a recovery. There's an external veneer that says, well, the stock market's up. Well, the stock markets across the world are up. GDPs are increasing. And GDPs, by the way, are generally measured, particularly for our country, a substantial measurement has to do with financial services. So the creation of this sort of on-paper wealth drives how we consider our recovery, and other countries consider their recovery to be.
But only the mega bankers are making the record bonuses. The only sector that's showing the big profits is the banksters, because they're the parasite.
They're the parasite. They're those services. They're the purveyor of why markets go up, why profits from corporations go up. It's all related to what happens with the banking sector. I mean, it's the kernel of all of this worldwide, because they all operate worldwide. But on the flip side are people's real economies. On the flip side is not being able to make ends meet. On the flip side is wages being worth less than what they were 35 years ago. So there hasn't been an increase for those people. You
predicted a lot of what happened 6 years ago in your first book because you were an insider. Where do you see things going? Because it's clear they're not going to change course, even if the world's revolting against them. How do you see it ending?
I honestly think it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. When I left the industry and rolled other people's money in 2004, and credit derivatives were a tiny speck on the financial speculation screen, and CDOs were tiny, but they were murky, and they were leverageable, and they were dangerous, and things have gotten more complex and dangerous since then because there's been no opposition. There have been no regulatory barriers to stop the type of financial instruments and financial pillaging that's been going on. It's only gotten worse. But now there's a pretense that it's better. There's a pretense there's financial reform. Stock markets are back up, as we just mentioned, and so forth. So I don't think that gets better. I don't think that changes people's individual economies. I think it's going to get a lot worse, therefore, before it gets better, because after all of what we saw in 2008 globally, after banking systems throughout the world, particularly ours, we're looking at bankruptcy and we're looking at potential collapse and an inability to fund themselves, they all got better. They all got government injections, but the individuals, people in the various countries did not. And that will create a more unstable, less equal set of economies between the banking economy and the people's economy for the foreseeable future. So I just see it, unfortunately, getting worse. I wish I saw it differently. But
well, I tend to agree with you, unfortunately. Nomi Prinz, stay there. We're going to do 5 more minutes with you on the other side. Coming up, we've got Brad Meltzer of Decoded popping in, and then George Noory to give us his take on Egypt, the economy, and so much more. Nomi Prinz, best-selling author, formerly managing director at Goldman Sachs, joins us, and I want to get her back up in the near future just to talk about Goldman Sachs itself. But I look at Goldman Sachs with all of its people in government giving themselves government bailout. I see them knowingly selling the Timberwolf, telling investors it was great, and then privately laughing at their investors. It's a very piratical, worldview, and then they don't get in trouble because it's their people running the SEC. Same with J.P. Morgan and the handful of the other, 5 big super banks. And I was talking about how they are exempt from all their own rules. And you said, yeah, look at the IRS. I mean, it's this inequity and this criminality that they just never get in trouble because they control the government.
Well, exactly, and all of those companies tend to pay less in taxes because they have the accountants, because they know the loopholes, because they are offshore, and a number of different reasons. Whereas, just talking about the IRS, audits for the middle class have tripled. Actually, New York Times reported this a few years ago. They had tripled during this last decade for sort of regular people. I read an article, actually, an alternate recently. It was an old article from 2009 that just made me livid about a single mom with 3 kids who was told by the IRS that she made too much money as a hairdresser at Supercuts, where she made $18,000 a year, and that therefore she couldn't deduct her children who live with her because she was able to make ends meet on almost nothing. They thought she was hiding something. So those are the people that get targeted. Whereas corporations are paying less and less on a proportional basis of the receipts.
Google pays 2.4% taxes. Some of these big banks work it out because they write the loopholes and get them passed. Pay nothing. I mean, and then meanwhile, I'm paying at the end of the day. They claim it's 35%, but it's more like 40%. They've got it all figured out.
Right, and it's more than that, because if you have expenses, you're going to be treated differently than a corporation is going to be treated. So it's really all figured out, and therefore it looks like we are in a much worse condition as a country because we are disproportionately trying to suck money out of the people that have it least, and disproportionately allowing those that have it most to keep it. And that's been a problem generally in our economy, and that doesn't even count the trillions of dollars of bailouts that a lot of these financial institutions receive starting in late 2008, without which many might not be in existence today.
In closing, what do we do from your perspective to start countering this and somehow fix it? What are the solutions?
Well, I think one thing is shows like yours is getting information. I think a lot more people who feel disenfranchised and in a negative personal economy are looking for alternative information sources, to know they're not alone and they're not crazy and there's nothing wrong with them. There's actually real policies that are affecting them, and I think that's the start, is that kind of information sharing and that kind of knowledge. And then it's really organizing and getting together and trying to at least make our voices heard. I mean, there's something to be said for what's going on in the square in Egypt right now. And again, there are many reasons for that revolution taking place then, but many of them stem from being screwed by the international capital class and wanting very simple dignity and simple jobs and the ability to make a living.
And clearly, the international capital class is not really free market. It's crony market where they rig the system for themselves like a rigged casino. It's got to end. The problem is they're going to sell us collectivism is the answer, because then they can collect more of our wealth and steal it through government and give it to themselves. Very complex issue. Nomi Prinz of NomiPrinz.com. We look forward to having you back on to really get into Goldman Sachs itself in the next month or so. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'm honored that you're a listener.
Thank you, Alex. Take care.
There goes Nomi Prinz, amazing Goldman Sachs insider. We'll have her back very soon to get into Inside Goldman Sachs. We'll be right back. Brad Meltzer's coming up, then George Noory, and a lot more. Stay with us. All right, we're scheduled to have Brad Meltzer joining us here in about 7-8 minutes. We've only got him for 15, so we're going to skip the next network break coming up for stations that are out there. This is very important, obviously, what we've been talking about with the economy, because it affects us all. I want to get back into that and then some of the latest developments in Egypt as well. But before I go any further, we've posted a new article at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. There's also a trailer for the hour-long special with the father of weaponized weather, Ben Livingston. because it's normal to have different cycles and mega blizzards and hot temperatures and then cold temperatures. I mean, the only thing that's constant is change in weather and the climate. But Al Gore came out yesterday and said this is global warming to have snow. And, of course, a few years ago, and we've played the clips, he said we would have snowless winters because of global warming. He is a quack, he is a fraud, and he knows it. He's bought into the big carbon trading company with Bill Clinton and George Soros and others. So it's important, though, to understand that the federal government admits they have weather weapon programs, weather manipulation programs. The former Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, of course, has admitted all of this as well. And we need to understand that this could all be natural, what's happening. But the fact that it's all classified, or most of it's classified, what's going on with weather weapons and geoengineering and weather manipulation, that we need to demand all of this be declassified. The video and the article is up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. The father of weaponized weather. Veteran weather modification expert Ben Livingston is a former Navy physicist who briefed President Lyndon Baines Johnson the effectiveness of weather control back in the 60s. And, of course, he launched attacks on the North Vietnamese using it. He was the first guy to fly into typhoons and hurricanes with an aircraft in World War II and after World War II. He's an amazing individual. And when it was declassified 5 years ago, we were able to start talking about it. And most of this interview has never before been seen. We released one a few years ago, but this is the full thing with the latest information. And it's available at prisonplanet.tv. We are adding more and more exclusive original videos, all of my films, expanded extras, the live video stream of the radio show. That's also archived each day. My book, Paul Watson's book, countless other films we've been authorized to post, like Camp FEMA and many other documentaries. PrisonPlanet.tv is an armory of resistance, and we always run the special in December and January. We've never run it into February, where you can get 5 months free at PrisonPlanet.tv, but you can right now. And I've told them to pull down the special in the next 2 days, to go ahead and get around to it. But I wanted to have this Ben Livingston video go out first during the special, and so we're a little bit late pulling the special, but it's now available at PrisonPlanet.tv. And it is your support of the broadcast. It is your support of the radio show, of our local AM and FM sponsors, of our national sponsors. It's you spreading the word that allows us to continue and grow. And the information, obviously, we're covering is so vital to the future of this republic. So please don't forget to support our sponsors and to also become a PrisonPlanet.tv member. We allow you with the same username passcode to have 6 people logged on at one time with the same code. So you can also give yourself the gift of information and support us, but also share it with a few friends and family. I'd love to just give it out all for free, but then we couldn't finance ourselves. We also have the online video bookstore/t-shirt, ball caps, Infowars.com, Draft Ron Paul, V for Victory. A lot of new T-shirts up there as well at Infowars.com. And we couldn't do any of this, again, without your support. But great books, powerful films. You may know all about this stuff. You may know more than I do. But your neighbors, your friends, your family will watch professionally produced films. They will read well-written, dynamic, informative, intriguing books. And they're all available at Infowars.com, as I was saying earlier. Again, Brad Meltzer should be on the next 5 minutes or so. Then George Noory, who needs no introduction, will be joining us in the last half hour. I may twist his arm and go into overdrive, but I know the guy's got to probably go to sleep before he does his radio show again tonight, the second largest radio show in the world. So that is coming up as well today. Obviously, I spent much of the first hour getting into this article because it's so incredibly important. Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. We're doing the key Google search term today, Obama triggers blackouts. And you can read the article at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Obama's blocking of new power plants triggers nationwide blackouts. Fury as hospitals hit with outages while post-industrial collapse of America accelerates by design. And then insiders like GE gets waivers from all of this while they shut down power plants in Georgia, Kansas, South Dakota, and Texas. Shutting down old plants, shutting down new plants, or restricting the power output of plants while police stations, traffic lights, Hospitals don't have power. I mean, this is incredible. And while the globalists, the insiders that run our country, are the biggest holders of our debt through their pawn, China, this is high treason. I call treason, and I'm sick of it. And I want to get this report out to everybody. This article needs to be seen so people know why they're having blackouts all over the country, so they know why all of this is going on. This is important information. It just shows how brazen and naked the criminality has gotten in our society. And I just had the former managing director of Goldman Sachs on, agreeing and concurring with this insider takeover of the power plants and our society. It is so criminal, and somebody has got to stand up and basically call it what it is: treason, a sellout, where these select companies get unfair trade advantages against our entire society by doing this. And they're doing it on the health care, where if you're an Obama insider, you don't have to get the health care, an unfair trade advantage. They're doing it on NAFTA and GATT deals with select corporations can do whatever they want, small mom and pops or even larger independent groups can't. This is the system of control that we've been discussing. Now I am excited to be joined by Brad Meltzer. He's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Book of Fate, as well as the other bestsellers, The 10th Justice, Dead Even, The First Counsel, The Millionaires, The Zero Game, The Book of Lies. His latest book is, of course, The Inner Circle, and he is the producer or the creator of Decoded, the last episode of the latest season, coming up this Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern. We had Brad on last week, and he said, look, trust me, you're going to like the episode. And, yeah, they made me, I think, look pretty good. But that isn't the end-all, be-all in this. The real question is, did they present the Grove? And, of course, it's all from perspectives in a way that I think was accurate. I think they showed both sides, but leaned towards the Grovers. But what do you expect to get it on national TV? Brad, you hadn't seen the final cut yet. Were you happy with what aired last Thursday?
You know, I think you described it actually, near perfectly. Like, I think we show both sides. But the one thing I disagree is I don't think we lean toward the Grovers. I think that if you look at what's online, I think two things came through. I think, one, you came through like a hero, right? I mean, the last line about you was, let's get Alex out of here. It was like protective, very protective of you, and I'll wager good money in your experience that's rare for you, right? I mean, I felt like we took real good care for you, and I was proud of that we take care of the people who...
No, the only other national TV program to ever be fair and not trying to make me look like a kook is Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. So no, I mean, you did keep your, word on that. I mean, you said we'll be fair, and I think it was fair overall with myself. It's just that, the host of the show, but they've got their own views saying, oh, it's so wonderful, we wish we could be involved. And when you said, I briefly described the ritual, and you said, and that's it, that's all that happens there. And obviously you can't put everything in a short program, but there was a lot more there, and you did every...
But to be fair, and you saw this, right, we talked about this last week, they said legally we couldn't run the footage. If we were really being controlled by anyone who said no, we wouldn't have tried. I mean, we literally recreated that footage and had a whole art department. We pushed the show back 2 weeks to make sure that we could show the best version of that footage legally anyone would allow.
No, I mean, it was a beautifully done, well-produced...
we went all out to say, listen, man, this guy found this stuff. Let's look at it. I mean, this is the real deal. And I think, I think you made it... I actually think the interesting part of the episode was watching Buddy, Mac, and Scott, who are amazingly wonderful people. You spend time with them. You know that yourself. But I think they got really freaked out after being arrested. I really do. And I think, at the end of the show when they said, the Grove is this or that, I mean, listen, I had the last word on the show, and you saw how I closed it. And I closed it saying, what? I don't like when in America some people have more say than others. And I think that was a real... that was something to be listened to at that moment.
No, I mean,
not saying, hey, everybody, let's, this is all peace and love and happiness.
Brad, obviously, I have mixed feelings about the piece, and so I'm just giving people my honest view of it. Surely all the experts you talked to, and of course you just went and talked to real people, they all said at the end of the day we have a problem with the secrecy and policy being decided there. So you had all four of the people, the experts you interviewed, myself and three others concurred, from Mary Moore to the professor to everybody else. And so that point did get brought across honestly. And then your host kind of said, oh, we don't think there's a problem. But then you came back and said, no, I think there is. So overall, I think it was balanced. And what do people from our perspective, my listeners, expect to see Frankly, it was better than I thought it was going to be, Brad. So overall, I don't think you've been deceptive on that front, and I appreciate you involving me in the show.
Yeah, and listen, here's the thing is I can only, and you know this better than anybody, you can only represent yourself by your actions, not your words. And what we spoke about last week, I was like, Alex, listen, I haven't seen the final cut, but I saw the cut right before it, and I think you're going to go, this is more fair than anything you've seen out there when you go on, especially with you, because everyone, is always out to make you look like a nut.
No, the Trio Network.
And I was like, listen, I will only ever ask anyone to judge Decoded, and people have their own views of History Channel, and people have their own views of what you do, what I do, what all of us do, but you can only judge Decoded by watching it. And I think when you looked at the response the next day, I think the major call from Americans around the country on our Facebook page, on our Twitter account, everywhere that I had stuff, was like, man, you really tried to blow the lid off of something here. And it wasn't like, you were trying to protect something. You know what? I appreciate that people saw it for what it was. They didn't, we didn't, the thing that I thought was actually important and interesting is like, well, we really tried to, and I think we do it on every episode, is what you said, try to be fair. Show both sides, let people look, and let's make a sensible decision. And I think that we did. Let
me say this. The Trio Network aired the footage I shot 9 years ago, but obviously it probably has 1/100th at the time, the viewership that History Channel and a premier program like yours does. And they did basically try to make me look like a lunatic kook. So compared to that, compared to what they did, yes, I would say it's an A+. But compared to what my radio show or the internet, can do, having more time to really get into it, I'd give it a B. But for getting it on national television, I think it says something about how much culture's changed. They would have never allowed this on 10 years ago. I think the internet has pushed the boundaries of what can be shown and gotten into with how many media executives do go to the Grove. I am surprised it even aired. I'll be honest with you.
And I think you're right about this. I think also a very important thing you said is it's just a different world than 9 years ago, right? And when we started this show, this is fascinating to me. One of the producers said to me, Brad, on shows like this, and he's talking about every network, not talking about history by any stretch, but like on shows like this, we have people trying to get to the truth. Here's how it works, he says to me. He says, when you have less facts, you play more scary music. And I was like, man, no true words ever been spoken, but I never want to be that show. I never want to be the show that needs to rely on scary music for the thrills. To me, the most thrilling, scary story of all is the true story. So, we were like, let's go show it. Let's show what it is. If someone's got footage of it, let's air it. If we can't air it, let's reproduce it in a form that you can air. And I think, what I think America has done in Decoded, and when they watch it, and wait till you see tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is on the Georgia Guidestones. I don't know if you know the Georgia Guidestones, but it's like the Stonehenge of the United States. They're amazing. They're crazy.
Yeah, I think I said tomorrow night, thinking it's Wednesday. I guess tonight is Thursday, so it's tonight.
On History Channel, 10 p.m., 9 Central, you'll see our Georgia, we do American Stonehenge, and it'll blow your mind. We go and
well, it's Ted Turner. I mean, Ted Turner's.
Oh, we mentioned Ted Turner on the episode. We don't shy away from it.
But, I mean, it's Ted Turner that gave the money to the R.C. Christian.
You know what? I don't think what I say tonight on the episode is I think the Ted Turner theory is preposterous because Ted Turner is a guy that when you look at what his stuff is, he never shies away from taking credit. However, what we do at the end of the episode, and you'll see there, is we try to identify who R.C. Christian is. And, the idea that he's listen, this is a guy who's probably still alive. There's lots of theories of who he is and who put up this American Stonehenge. And
I got to stop you because we're almost out of time. We only got 8 minutes left here, Brad. But R.C. Christian is an anagram for Rosicrucians.
I know.
It's got to keep us at 500 million number. Yes, we've been there. Yes, we've covered it. Now let me get into the tough issues with you. And obviously, I'll be watching tonight with your show because I find it intriguing. We appreciate you giving us time. And hopefully, you'll come back on for 30 minutes or an hour in the future when the series is done, when you're not so busy. I know you're doing a bunch of interviews right now.
Yeah, awesome.
But here's what I have problems with. Buddy and them say, well, they're supposedly setting up this world government, but we're still here. No, we're going into a global government. They're announcing the global government run by the private banks. You go on and say, everybody always blames Skull and Bones for everything, but it hadn't been proven. Alfonso Taft set up Skull and Bones with Williams and Huntington Russell. It's admitted in mainline research that they did, Russell went to Germany and did join the Illuminati. There's a plaque inside the Skull and Bones, reportedly, when others broke into it in the 1880s, saying from the Illuminati to our U.S. chapter. I saw all sorts of Skull and Bones, pirate quotes, skulls, statements. I own 3 of the annals of the Bohemian Grove. which actually talk about connections. I have Helmut Schmidt's book, the German Chancellor, talking about the connections to the Bavarian Illuminati. And so to say, you know, Alex is saying there's a Skull and Bones connection. There's no doubt that you got Taft and others going there, and that's when the bigwigs show up, and it is a Skull and Bones type outfit.
Yeah, you know, and let me say this, is I went and searched, and I made sure that the people who were, when we were doing that show, I was like, listen, Alex just said Skull and Bones. If this is the great Skull and Bones one, find it, man. Let's go. Let's look and find out what they're doing now. And I can't argue. Listen, you know this stuff backwards. You know what you have, and I can't see it right now as I talk to you. But what I will say is, you know what my opinion of Skull and Bones is in 1992, when I was in college, my buddy Matt Oshinsky, who was a Yale undergraduate, and I used to go up and visit, I wanted to get into Skull and Bones in 1992, and I was like, take me in there. And he was basically like, these guys are yutzes, you know. And he was in his own secret society, but he was like, man, Skull and Bones isn't what it used to be. It used to be something awesome, right? It used to have the power elite. And it's just not the way it was today. And I can only say that everyone has their own personal experience. Yeah. My personal experience was my buddy was there, who I trust, who I knew was a stand-up guy, stand-up American, and was like, these guys aren't what they used to be. And it's like any other club.
Right, well, let me tell you.
Something in the day, but it's just not what it used to be. And to me, like, you find it, man, I'll air it. I'm ready. I would love to do Skull and Bones.
Brad, I'll send you to Charlotte Iserby, whose father and grandfather were Skull and Bones, and she's got the grandfather clocks. She's the one that gave Anthony Sutton all the secret documents. We've now copied them all. We're doing a big report on it. And let me tell you something. She says it's black magic occult. There is a cult going on there. Her dad was a guest of Bohemian Grove, and it's definitely connected, and they definitely get naked and are born again in coffins and the whole 9 yards. And I'm here to tell you, Skull and Bones is the Illuminati. It is very dark, and it is pushing a global, tyrannical world government. I mean, here's another issue I've got. And if you want to talk...
Let me also say this before you finish that thought, is send it to me. Because I again, as a man of my, not just word, but my actions, you can judge them. If you have the information, I'd love to put that on the air and show the truth. Like, but send it to me, because I'd love to do, if we get another season, I'd love to do Skull and Bones, man. I'd love to find out what the real story is there. That is what I'm dying to know. And if I don't ever proclaim that I know it all, I am willing to look at anything that anyone wants to send when it comes to proof. So please send it to me, pal.
Well, I'm not trying to keep slapping you around. I'm just doing an honest interview.
Good stuff, man. You gave us an A+. I can't ask for more than that.
Well, I mean, an A+ compared to anything else that's ever been on television.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll take it. I'll take a curve.
But I mean, I think that's about as much as you could get on TV. But I mean, even showing the other side and being fair. But here's another big issue. You said, okay, that's the ritual. The most important thing I may say on this broadcast, this program, is that outsiders shouldn't try to interpret this. I went to professors. I researched the occult. And those old men watching that ritual were taking it as a ritual. They were getting off on it. They were grinding their teeth. There's a bunch of other rituals. I did tell your crew, and it's even at Vanity Fair and the New York Post, about the gay porn stars being brought in, the sex, the homosexuality. That did not make it in the show. And so it is an occult ritual. They do take it serious. And as an outsider, I'm able to research the occult and know what's happening. I think that prejudiced everything I said in the program when you said that.
It's interesting, because I actually took it a different way. I actually took it as, again, it's like when we went into Freemasonry and we went looking at Freemasonry, I think a lot of stuff in Freemasonry gets taken literally that's meant figuratively. And I'm not defending it. I'm not protecting it. I'm not saying either way. People have their opinions.
Well, the Porch Masons aren't bad people, and many of our founders were Masons, and they spoke out against the Illuminati.
My point is simply that and it wasn't meant to slap anyone either way. When I said that statement, it was, and I stand behind that. To me, is still the best thing that I said on that whole episode, except for maybe the closing remarks of the episode. And it was, when you try to analyze something, when you truly try to decode something, you have to understand the context. And I think even you'd agree with that, right? You've got to know the context of what it is. And if the context is really a cult and is really world domination, then yeah, we should go after them. But, just because you have, there are a lot of crazy sworn-in things we do in this
country. I've got their annals. They've released to universities what they've been doing for 100 years, like Berkeley, and they're the ones that want world government. They're the ones pushing, and I think you were somewhat fair, allowing me to even say that, but you've seen Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. You've seen The Order of Death, the 2 films I have on one DVD, and if folks want it, it's available at Infowars.com, Brad, or at least your crew's seen it. I mean, we've done deep research. If these guys are taking... I've talked to widows of Bohemian Grove members who talk about how they worship little owls in their houses. At the Bohemian Grove headquarters in San Francisco, carved on the side are men in robes about to throw a baby into a fire. I mean, I've got their own publications where it shows a child in a pool of blood. I mean, this
you know what? And here, and I'm again not defending them, but just putting it in context. Is when I was in high school, there was an amazing scavenger hunt. Okay, and it made the New York Times. Okay, from where I was in Florida, it made the New York Times a high school scavenger hunt for one reason, Alex, and it was this. It was that some dummy at the very end of the day, when they were putting all the things that stop signs that people were supposed to steal, and and go get a sign for McDonald's and whatever else they were supposed to get, a Happy Meal, that someone put a live human baby. Okay,
I hear you, Brad. We're out of time. The show's on tonight. Look forward to talking to you soon. Let me say bye to you during the break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, he is the #1 overnight talk show host in the world. He is the 2nd largest talk show host on the planet, but he is the #1 overnight in the world, #2 worldwide behind Rush Limbaugh, a close second. And in the age of Anderson Cooper with 1 million viewers and Glenn Beck, with 3 million on Fox, it's amazing when you talk about media. The only media on this planet, of the thousands and thousands of choices on broadcast and mainline media, and alternative included, the only audiences that are still mega huge and actually reach giant numbers of people are massive syndicated talk radio. And, of course, he's right up there at the top on internet as well. And it's great to have somebody like George Noory, because I admire Art Bell, incredibly well-spoken, very intelligent. I admire him as a broadcaster. But when George Noory took the show over 7-8 years ago and took the show in a somewhat other direction, started covering a lot of hardcore political issues, forced inoculations, the private Federal Reserve, the Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove, George Noory pulls no punches, censors no one, and no one anywhere in what can be called mainstream media. And, of course, he's that crossover. He's both alternative and mainstream. No one can hold a candle to George Noory. And he's with us for the next 45 minutes. We'll take calls for 15, 20 minutes or so into the next hour. Right now, I've got George all to myself. The website's coasttocoastam.com. That's coasttocoastam.com. Really, probably no stranger to most of you out there, but if you're new listeners out there or haven't given it a listen, it's on 500-plus radio stations across the country. In fact, George, I know the show just keeps growing, even past what Art Bell did. How many stations are you on now, George?
As of yesterday, Alex, my affiliates people sent me my monthly report. We are now on 540 stations in North America, which is an all-time high. And as you were saying, we're the 2nd largest affiliated program in the country. Like a horse race, we're coming around the stretch, and I think we're going to be #1. I really do. I can feel it, and I can see it, and that's our goal. So we've got a hard, dedicated staff. And though we're going right after one of our own syndicated folks, I want to beat him. And that's what we're going to do.
Hey, well, Rush is all about the free market of ideas. And so, in fact, I've even seen industry publications say that if you continue to grow like this, within 6 months to a year, you may eclipse Rush Limbaugh.
That's right. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens. And I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I was having lunch in Austin, Texas, and I found a black book, a small black book. I opened it up, and it was the Alex Jones playbook of how to do a successful show. And it said, cover the Federal Reserve, cover inoculations. So I took it, and I changed the format.
Did you really find a black book?
No, I'm kidding.
It's a metaphor, yeah. Oh, man, you are something else. Well, look, we have talked a lot about globalist forces, the big mega Davos, George Soros type folks who, we think of it as America versus the Middle East or America versus Russia. No, these globalists want turmoil. They want the strategy of tension. You've talked so much about that. And now we see what's happening in the Middle East and the Muslim Brotherhood openly being funded by our own government, openly calling for an end to the peace treaty with Israel if they take over Egypt. And the whole world is saying, why would our government overthrow their own puppet? They're not trying to bring in a democracy, which I wish they would, or a free society. They're trying to bring in something in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Yemen, in Egypt, that is going to destabilize the entire region. What's your view on that?
Well, there's something very strange going on in the Middle East, Alex. And as you know, I am Middle Eastern. I'm a Christian Lebanese. My father was born in Cairo. My mother, who is Christian Lebanese, was born in Boston, Massachusetts, Pittsburgh, actually. I know the Middle East probably better than most national radio talk show hosts. I was raised in it. I mean, we eat the food. We know the culture. Now, I speak broken Arabic. I mean, I know the Middle East. And there's a situation out there that is very scary right now, and that is you just don't know who the players are. And by that I mean governments have propped up dictatorship regimes for years. We did it with Saddam Hussein. We've done it with Mubarak. And the people of these countries at this point are fed up with it. Whether they hate America or not, and that we can talk about in a moment, they are fed up with the dictators controlling their destiny. The unemployment rate in Egypt is absolutely ridiculous. Those people of young age, the unemployment rate has got to be over 40 to 50%. People are existing on a few dollars a day, and they're at a point where they said enough is enough. Now, the problem with all this is you just don't know who's instigating, how it started. I mean, we saw what happened in Tunisia weeks ago, and now all of a sudden it filtered into Yemen, it's filtered into Egypt, and you don't know if the globalists are behind it or not, and it's very frustrating. I think what happened is Mubarak had to go. He's been in power for 30 years, and governments probably said, geez, enough of this guy. Let's get something fresh in here. But the population of those countries took things into their own hands through the power of the Internet, through the power of Facebook, through the power of Twitter, something they've never anticipated before. And these people have organized their own peaceful protests. Now, just yesterday, we saw what happened in Cairo with Mubarak supporters, henchmen, who started causing problems, shooting and everything else. Now, the place is in chaos. I think Egypt's going to collapse, and I don't know what direction, honestly, it's going to go.
Well, George, I'm going to put a headline up on the TV screen for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers, but for listeners, the London Telegraph, the Associated Press, they all reported U.S. government. Here's the headline: Egypt protest, America's secret backing for rebel leaders behind uprising. And now it's confirmed. They met a year ago, 6 months ago, and again 3 weeks ago with the Muslim Brotherhood, who are openly now saying they're going to overthrow all of the regimes, including the Jordanians, the Saudi leadership, who I'm no fan of any of them. I mean, I've been a big critic of Hosni Mubarak and the black sites and the torture sites and the ghost sites. But at the same time, then you see them maneuvering the Muslim Brotherhood and this El-Baradi, who's this big UN chief, who's a globalist. And our government says, oh, we don't really want freedom there. We just want something new. And then now know this group that George Soros funds, the crisis group, is involved. And then suddenly they're announcing we're going to take over and we're going to break our peace treaty with Israel. And Israel's freaking out. I mean, that looks like the ordered out of chaos card. Here's a headline today: Muslim Brotherhood wants end to Egypt-Israeli peace deal. I mean, this is some scary stuff, but we know the globalists, again, want to play countries off against each other.
Oh, there's no question about it. Look, my father, when I was growing up as a boy in Detroit, Michigan, was a member of an organization called the Mardin Club. Now, Mardin was in Turkey, and we had a lot of relatives who were also born out there. We're not Turkish, but that's where they were. And in Detroit, they had this building. They had a club. It was called the Mardin Club, and I would go with him. I was 8 years old, 9 years old. I would go with him when they would get together on Friday nights or Saturday nights, and this is what they did. They ate Middle Eastern food. They played Middle Eastern music. They played, well, I thought it was dominoes, but it was a different kind of game. And they just had a great time. There was nothing clandestine. They never talked about overthrowing governments. They loved America. They were immigrants who came here legally. Something strange about the Muslim Brotherhood. It was formed in Egypt a long time ago as a peaceful organization to promote Islam. That's what they wanted to do. That's what their intent was. Along the line, some people infiltrated that organization and started spouting the hatred that we see today.
British intelligence, that's on record. Well, they want to destabilize.
You go to Osama bin Laden was basically part of that organization and broke away because that group at the time did not want to be violent. They were peaceful. Now, whether it's political or not, during 9/11, they came out and condemned that horrible situation. But here's the problem today. Number one, Alex, as you and I know when you talk with me on Coast to Coast, we don't know who to believe anymore. We know a couple things that are true, and that is the globalists want to control this planet. The globalists will do whatever they have to do in order to disrupt all of us. I am so convinced at this point that if every person who hated America for whatever reason said, you know what, we want peace, let's make this work, we're done with violence, I'm convinced the globalists would do things and blame it on those people again. So you don't know who to believe anymore. And I am deathly afraid that this planet is heading toward some kind of massive destruction in terms of political leanings, that there may be nothing we can do except to continue to fight on the air and do what we're doing. I find it amazing that you and I continue to talk without anybody clipping the wires.
Well, that was the next issue I was going to raise. I want to get back into geopolitically what's happening with the dollar devaluation, now putting incredible pressure on countries like Egypt, where right at half the population is on $2 a day. The IMF, World Bank pressuring them to cut the food allotment. 43 million Americans now on food stamps. So the big central banks, the globalists, trigger a political atmosphere that they know is going to cause upheaval in the Middle East and North Africa. Then they roll in with the, quote, revolutionaries, knowing that revolution was already coming, so they're going to use it to put in a new system, and then it looks like it's going to be a system that wants to have war with Israel. So it's proof right there that this unseen hand is now coming out in the open. But I want to get more into that with you, George, in a moment. But first, you brought up censorship. We have the FCC announcing that they want to run the internet and control it. We've got all these diversity czars at the FCC saying they want to restrict free speech. We have MSNBC now saying the Tea Party is like the, quote, Muslim Brotherhood and radical and dangerous. That came out last night with Chris Matthews. We have the White House regulations are calling to restrict free speech. We have the internet kill switch being announced, similar to what we just saw in Egypt. We're now really starting to see a move where don't talk about political stuff, or you could cause another Tucson shooting when we know the guy was drugged out of his mind and had nothing to do with politics. We're finally not just seeing an attack on the Second Amendment, we're seeing open trial balloons to go after the First as we go into this global depression. George Noory, what's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I can't believe, but I had an email after the Tucson tragedy when I called that shooter on the air a whacked-out lunatic. And the next day, I got an email from a woman who said, how can you do that to him? He's got rights, too. And I went, man, these people just don't understand. They just don't understand. Look, there's something. When I was in school, I was told two things. One is the airwaves belong to the public. The public's interests, convenience, and necessity. They're not owned by me. They're not owned by corporations. The public owns those airwaves. We were under the fairness doctrine when I was in broadcasting in 1971. That's a long time ago. It didn't bother me. I mean, I think broadcasters have a responsibility, Alex, to balance their shows. I think if you or if I say something about someone or someone, we should back it up with facts and also give them the opportunity or someone to explain how they feel. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's happened today is everybody's gone in these different tangents, these different directions, and they forgot about the most important thing that has kept American broadcasting so strong, and that is balance. And we just don't have that anymore. When I started tweaking Coast to Coast 8 years ago, I did it for one main reason. This planet was changing and changing very fast, and it needed voices and it needed truth. We still do, as you well know, the ghosts, the UFOs, the Bigfoots, the mysteries. We do all that stuff. I love that. But we had to add the other ingredient. And specifically after 9/11 occurred, regardless of how you believe it happened or who did it, we needed to tweak this program, and I did that. And so I devote the first hour to hard news, breaking issues with a coast-to-coast Alex Jones-type flair to it. I don't want to do what mainstream does. You know, I don't want to, by the time I'm on the air, that stuff's been beaten like a horse. And I don't want to go in that direction. But we will cover those topics. But I think governments are taking a very close look at all kinds of things right now, including a kill switch for the Internet, because they saw what happened in Egypt. And I think these are very dangerous times for us.
Well, sure, I agree with you, but you talk about imbalance. When we have J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs knowingly creating trillions in derivatives, knowing it's worthless, selling it to people, then demanding taxpayer money for it. When you have the government trying to shut down power plants in the U.S., and then building power plants in China, and we're having rolling blackouts, when we have the imbalance of all of this corruption, obviously people are going to get angry. They're going to get upset and try to bring balance back to that. And speaking of what's happening to the economy worldwide, I mean, every economist I have on says we're already in a depression, and we have incredible unemployment. But where do you see the economy going? Where do you see the globalists pushing this?
Alex, let me tell you something. I have never seen a situation where more people were so destitute or in trouble in all my life. I mean, personally, I'm helping my 3 children with their mortgages and their car payments because they're my kids. You know, I can't see them tossed out. You know, they've got some problems financially, as most Americans do right now. I have had friends call me asking for $1,000 or $2,000 that they say, I want to borrow. Now, you know, when you lend money to a friend, you're not getting it back. It's gone. And so you do it. But I've never seen a situation where more people were so backed up. And it's not like they're going to bars every night and, you know, going out to party with them.
And the media is telling us everything's great, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what's happening. Those of us who are working, you and me and other people, are doing okay. We're paying our bills. We're buying things once in a while. We're keeping the economy going. I mean, the automobile sales in the U.S. have gone up. People who are working are spending their money, and they're doing okay. But the number of people who aren't working and who aren't okay continues to grow dramatically. And here's the problem. When you create a society between the haves and the have-nots, when that disparity begins to get wider and wider and wider, we are going to have a disaster. What is happening in Egypt can happen here.
Amazing. George Noory is our guest. We'll continue. We're going to do 15, 20 minutes of calls in the next hour for George. Specific questions for him, 800-259-9231. Stay with us. A lot more coming up. George Noory is our guest, and I want to get more into where he sees this economy going, the loss of liberty, the TSA putting up telescreens in 9,000 locations saying spy on your neighbor. So much of what he's been talking about for decades on radio and what I've been talking about for 16 years is now unfortunately unfolding, and so the credibility of people that cover these type of subjects is really going up. But before we get into that and then come back and take calls, George, for 15, 20 minutes in the next hour, tell us about your books. Tell us about your radio show. Tell us about Coast to Coast AM for folks that may not routinely tune in because, you know, they've got to work during the day. They can always subscribe to Streamlink and listen whenever they want like I do on my iPhone.
Oh, we love Streamlink. It only costs, if you can believe this, 25 cents a day. but, they can get downloads, podcasting, and it's really an exciting facet of listening to the program, along with your terrestrial radio station, which has really been the staple of Coast to Coast over all these years. It continues to grow, Alex. Just yesterday, I signed an extension taking me through 2013, and the network at the same time said, hey, sometime this year, let's talk about a 5-year extension beyond that. So, I'm going to end up being the Casey Kasem of radio. I mean, I'm going to just hang in there as long as I can, bringing everybody the truth. We've got a couple books out. My partner for writing, Bill Burns, who does an incredible job doing 98% of the legwork for these things. Worker in the Light and Journey to the Light. The Worker, of course, being the first one in Journey. And I've got another one coming out in the fall with Rosemary Ellen Guiley called Talking to the Dead, which is more like the old traditional coast-to-coast show. But, I've got a twofold goal, and that is, one, stay healthy, because I had a lot of problems, 10 years ago, and I didn't eat right, and I did stupid stuff, and I decided, enough is this. And I got into a major workout regimen and eating properly and taking natural supplements. And I hope to God we can continue to take natural supplements. But that's the direction I'm going.
Oh, yeah, you're in great shape. And expanding on that, George, you also have done quite a few national TV shows on Sci-Fi Channel and others. I mean, you're doing a lot.
Yeah, I am. Henry Winkler, the Fonz, approached us a couple months ago, and he would like to do a Twilight Zone type show and said, look, I want you to be Rod Serling. So let's see what he works on. But, the bottom line here is I want this program to succeed. I want you to succeed for people. I'm going to tell you a funny story. As you know, I go back and forth between St. Louis and Los Angeles. My family's in St. Louis, so I have a chance to go see my kids, my soon-to-be 6 godchildren. And we just built this little facility in Hawaii, by the way, that I can pop up there and do a show out of there, too. It gives us that flavor way out there. But I'm at my favorite restaurant in St. Louis called the Cafe Napoli. And I'm sitting there, I sit in the corner, and a guy comes in, and he's staring at me. And I'm going, oh, boy, here we go. And a young guy, his name's Corey, and he comes up to me and he goes, oh, my God, it's you. And I said, I figured, I'll sign an autograph. I always do that. Or if they want a picture, I'll do that. It's free. I don't charge for that stuff. I'm not like some of the baseball players. And he comes up to me and he goes, my God, it's you. It's you. And I said, yeah. I put out my hand and he went, God, I love Alex Jones. I went, hey, what?
Hey, I get the same thing all the time. But, George, that's what I love about you. You reach more people than anybody in the world on any media outlet in a single day except for Rush Limbaugh. I mean, there's no doubting that. And you are such a humble, nice, friendly guy, especially in person when we've gone out, to eat before and been able to hang out with you and, of course, Tom Danheiser. George Noory, most radio talk show hosts are pretty arrogant. And most of them don't have other radio talk show hosts on their show. But George has myself on and many other talk show hosts because he's such a confident guy and he's into the information. Back in 1 minute. CoastToCoastAM.com. It's George Noory. And with few guests do I thank them and, kind of butter them up. But I really owe George a lot because I really want to reach people. I want to warn folks about corrupt things that are happening. I get angry about being oppressed. And he's the biggest outlet to ever just give me free reign and to reach 16 million people a night. And I've been on the show probably 60, 70 times. I haven't counted it in the last 7.5 years. And he took a risk putting Alex Jones on. And we were growing exponentially way back then. But now it just supercharged us like nitrous oxide on a drag racer. And I just want to thank you again, George, for helping me get the word out.
Well, Alex, you earned your way on the Coast to Coast. When I started doing the program, I didn't know who you were. I was into the paranormal, the unusual, and I kept getting emails from people saying, you ought to put talk show host Alex Jones on. And, well, at that point, brand new, just replaced Art Bell, Mr. Competitive here, doing what I'm doing. I'm going, God, what do I want to promote another talk show host for? But I started getting more and more and more of these emails, and I said, you know what, I better start listening to this guy. So I Googled you. Up came PrisonPlanet.com, Infowars.com. I started listening to some of the things you did, and I said, I like this guy. And I said, he's like a little brother to me. And I said, you know, the things he says are right on. And then you and I had that first program, and it just exploded our phone lines. And that's been our relationship ever since, other than when you pushed me into a lake in Austin, Texas.
Hey, you got to stop with that joke. I've had people come up to me on the street and go, "Why'd you push George Noory into the pond?" And I'm like, I didn't.
It's on YouTube. I don't know. I think if you just go into the search on YouTube and go Noory Falls, you'll see a 7-second clip coming out of the radio station, KLBJ at night, you, me, Danheiser, and I hit what I thought was a half-inch puddle of water. They had the sprinklers going on all night, and I hit a half-inch pool of water that ended up being 2 feet deep. And I went right down into it and right on my face. And I had that big event, as you know, the Talk Fest, the next day. I didn't have any backup clothes. I was soaked to the gills. And Danheiser had to go out and buy me clothes. I'm in my hotel room, stark naked, waiting for him to get in there with new shoes, pants, and a shirt. And down come the window washers. They come right down to my level, and I'm standing right in front of them. No clothes on, and the guy just keeps cleaning the window. No big deal.
Well, I just want to say, we just played the video, and I am a good 8 feet from you when you fall down. It's Danheiser that's behind you.
Harvey Oswald, sure, you're 8 feet away from me.
Listen, we've only got one more segment with you, but it's a long segment, 12 minutes or so. We're going to go talk to Henry, Al, Bell, Noel, and Tony. Quick questions or comments for George Noory when we come back in this next segment. But what's coming up tonight on Coast to Coast AM? What's coming up in the next few days?
First hour, we'll talk a little bit about Egypt and some other mainstream issues with that coast flavor. And then the full show, a little more coasty tonight as we talk with Dr. Richard Boylan about what he believes to be anti-UFO machines that are flying around all over the planet. So we'll get into that with him. And then Friday, I always dedicated to some fun, unusual things. We're going to be talking to the people from Ripley's Believe It or Not, and then we'll have open lines later on in the program on Friday night out.
We've only got about a minute, but what did you think of that strange UFO over the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem?
The Dome of the Rock. Bizarre timing. I mean, things are happening. They're weird. Now, in this particular case, I don't know if it's a sign from above or whether someone's got some drone out there just checking things out. Who knows? But I'm telling you, we get some bizarre things. The strangest story, of course, is the crop formation in Indonesia. Indonesia! I mean, the farmer said he was there 6 hours before and there was nothing there. You can't make it that fast, even with 90 people. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I think they're really gearing up for a fake-type UFO invasion. We know under Project Bluebeam that's there as well, and they've got this Battle of Los Angeles coming out. I mean, they're really pushing it. George Noory is our guest, coasttocoastam.com. Our sites are Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. We'll be right back after this quick break with your phone calls. Stay with us. We've only got him for one more segment because he's got to get some sleep for Coast to Coast AM, midnight Central. That'd be 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 a.m. Eastern, coasttocoastam.com. I'm Alex Jones. And there's so many other subjects I could sit here and hog George with, like what does he think of all the crazy weather, the weather weapons, Al Gore saying the cold weather's caused by global warming, the carbon taxes, the government trying to shut down more power plants. But I don't want to hog him, but briefly, what's your view on the carbon taxes crippling our power plants? We can't build new ones, and we're having blackouts everywhere.
It's all a scam to make money, Alex. I mean, this whole thing. What Al Gore doesn't understand, and what so many globalists who support global warming, is that we are in an Earth cycle. This solar system and the planets in it are warming up. Unless I'm wrong, I don't think we have plants and factories and cars on Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. But those planets are warming up as well. The solar system goes through a cycle, and we're going through one right now. Now, is mankind contributing, speeding things up? That's a possibility. I'm not going to rule that out. But this was going to happen anyway. It'll go away, and it'll start again, whether we have people on this planet or not. But the scam to make more money, squeezing us. I mean, we should do a show on red light cameras and the ridiculousness of what they're doing to try to raise more revenue. You talk to any police officer in this country, they're opposed to that. They wish these cameras would fall off the pole.
Well, in San Diego, they were forced to remove them a few years ago because they weren't even following the law, and they were caught shortening the yellow part of the light so people couldn't stop, and it was causing accidents. Absolutely. Going to phone calls. Henry in California, you're on the air with George Noory.
Hi. I was wondering about George's opinion about certain guests and the ability for them to just suddenly de-res out. And it's never with a guest that's talking about, a light thing like tarot cards or, something like the Easter Bunny. It's always about a hard-hitting black budget issue.
Henry, let me tell you something. Like Jordan Maxwell, who's been on the program, and just when he's ready to get into the meat of what he's on the show for, his phone goes dead or something bizarre like that happens. It happens a lot. And as you know, I don't believe in coincidences. I mean, there's some kind of phone kill switch somewhere.
Well, we know. Just like the internet kill switch.
Correct. Yeah, so I think those things happen.
Well, anything else, Henry?
Does he have an opinion about certain in my opinion, ventriloquists that will call in and misrepresent themselves? I don't want to say their names, but I really think Alex has been victim to some of these gag pranks, especially when they did the TSA special, that can bypass screeners. But I really think they're professional.
Well, let me stop you because I haven't heard of this, but it wouldn't be ventriloquist. It would be a imitator, somebody calling in and posing as someone. I have that happen a lot. But more than that, they have these computer boards where they record my voice and other people's voices, and they have hundreds of statements, and then they call into shows and have me threaten people, or they call old ladies. And I've actually had the cops call me before, and I've had people call and say, quit calling my house, and they're doing this as a form of harassment. I appreciate your call.
Boy, that hasn't happened to me yet. That's bizarre.
Do you know what he's talking about, the TSA special you did and something happening?
No, I don't. But, we have done programs where we've had guests on and they have mysteriously been clipped away, and then we try to call them back and they never come back online again. It's strange stuff.
Yeah, I've heard that happen over the years. It's happened to Art Bell as well. Just a brief story. When I was at Bilderberg and covering it on your show in 2008 in Chantilly, and Obama was coming to be there, after it was over, we were at a steakhouse. It had just ended after the 2 days. I called my wife. She told me one of her parents was sick. Hung up the phone, and somebody called and said, we're basically from the government. We want you to know we just heard what your husband said to you. So they let her know they were listening, and then they basically, threatened her and did some other things. So, yes, that stuff goes on.
Well, and it has been going on, Alex, for a long, long time, but it's getting worse, don't you think?
It certainly is. It's crazy. Let's talk to Al in Texas. You're on with the biggest talk show host overnight in the world and about to take the crown from Rush Limbaugh as the biggest, period, George Noory. Al, you're on the air.
Hi, guys. Much respect to you both. Quickly touching on the telephone phasing out, I used to see the same thing on Matrix News Network when I would watch that when I lived up north. But my main question for you, Mr. Noory, I don't get a chance to listen to your show a lot. I'm usually asleep. I have to work very early in the morning. I do listen to Alex Jones, and I've heard his take on China, and I agree with a lot of what Mr. Jones has to say about China, but I would like to get your take on what exactly you think, or what you think about the Chinese takeover and how everything is going over there. You can't buy a box of matches at Kroger's without it being made in China.
Sure. Good question, Al, from Texas. Thanks for the call. George, your view on Hu Jintao bad-mouthing the dollar at the state dinner, having their pianist play an anti-America song, being the biggest owner of our debt. What's your view?
Well, first of all, real quickly, you can always get Streamlink for 25 cents a day and podcast it. The show will be waiting for you in the morning right there for you, so you don't have to worry about sleep. China has put together one of the most brilliant economic tactics I've ever seen. Here was a nation 30, 35, 40 years ago that could barely do anything. Now they're pumping out everything in a massively growing economy. They are brilliant at what they do. Unfortunately, 75 people run that communist country, and they've got their eyes on Taiwan and everything else, and they're not going to stop. They have incredible patience, and they will continue to do what they do. They already own most of America. They own our debt. We are slaves to them, and it's just a matter of time when they decide to call in their chips.
I agree with that statement, and there's the other facet of the globalists making deals with China and then using regulations to shut down China's competition here in the U.S. That's what Kissinger and others are all about, and it's so dangerous. Bell in South Carolina, you're on with George Noory.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Bell.
Hi. I just wanted to say, Mr. Noory, that I'm very happy with the way the show is going now. I'm really excited about what you're doing, and you're such a beautiful soul. About the weather modification, I have a link for everybody. This particular document pretty much answered the question for me of whether or not the weather's being controlled, and the logical conclusion that I come to is that yes, it is always, and that every event is being manufactured. It's kind of a long link, but it's on the cftc.gov site.
Oh, the CFR has a report about weather manipulation. Send us that link. Send that link to George. I appreciate your call, Bell. George, more and more they just admit that they're doing geoengineering.
Oh, of course they are. We know what's been happening in Dubai and every place else. It's happening. Let me give out my email address, Alex, to any of your listeners who want to send me material. George at Coast2, you got to put that TO in there, coasttocoastam.com.
Let's jam in a few more here because we only got about 3 minutes left with George. Noel in Illinois, you're on the air with George Noory.
God bless you both. George, I heard your interview with Ty Bollinger the other night. Alex, you should interview him. This guy is unbelievable. He is fighting the resistance. He is V for victory. 2 questions quickly. George, your thoughts on Big Sister Homeland Security being brazenly out in the open with everything. She will make her debut on the Super Bowl with a commercial. If you see something, say something.
That's right. They're using taxpayer money to force their messages on us.
The only victory we've got is they're doing away with that lousy color scheme, which I hated from the get-go.
What's your view on the telescreens going in stores all over the country saying, watch your neighbor?
You remember years ago we would watch films and movies where you'd see Big Brother on a huge screen talking to us constantly while people walked and shopped. That's where we're headed. That's going to happen. I think it's horrible, but it's going to happen, Alex. You're going to have these screens all over the planet where you'll have this Big Brother, maybe even a computer-animated guy looking at you, right? Just saying, do this, do this, do this.
Unbelievable.
And,
they are... Yeah. They're doing it. It's happening. Last caller for George Noory. You can hear more of him tonight, midnight central, coasttocoastam.com. Ryan in Texas, you're on the air.
This is the first time I've actually got through. I appreciate you taking my call. I had a question for Mr. Noory about the glass tubes of Mars, actually.
Well, it's an incredible story. If you believe that Mars was once inhabited, then you have to believe that it was intelligent life and that they built structures on Mars, on the moon, and God knows where else. I happen to believe that there are extraterrestrials out there in the universe, that we've been visited before, and we might even have been seeded. So it's entirely possible that there are structures on these other planets and moons throughout our solar system.
Well, I know this. There's ice caps on Mars, and they claim they found evidence that there was life there. And I don't think we're the only creatures in this universe of hundreds of billions of admitted galaxies. The problem is there's just so much conflicting information out there, but folks can decipher through all of it and try to make up their own mind, certainly at coasttocoastam.com. George, we're about to end this segment. I want to say bye to you briefly during the break, but I just want to thank you for, again, exposing my information to 16 million people. That's 16 million every night, a lot more than that over the years. And just appreciate the work you're doing for the First Amendment.
Well, Alex, I'll continue to do it, and you continue to do what you do, and maybe one day we'll win this battle.
Well, I mean, we should have talked about that. Do you agree the tide's turning, the awakening is accelerating?
The awakening is accelerating. I'm not sure we're winning yet, but at least it's accelerating.
At least we're in the fight. Well, that's George Noory of coasttocoastam.com, second biggest syndicated program in the country and going out worldwide via Premier Radio Networks. And we appreciate George and everybody else's help getting us on XM. We start weekdays live instead of being re-aired at night. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.